The Projection of the Astral Body by Sylvan J. Mульdon and Hereward Carrington. Author of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them, Higher Psychical Development, Modern Psychical Phenomena, etc. In my opinion, it is this notion of a subtle body, which for so many centuries has played the dominant role in the traditional psychology of both the East and the West, that is most deserving of being retried, reviewed, and revised to serve as a working hypothesis to coordinate and explain a very large number of these puzzling psychical phenomena. J.R.S. Med in the Subtle Body. These self-projections represent the most extraordinary achievements of the human will, and are perhaps acts which a man might perform equally well before and after death. F. W. H. Myers in Human Personality. First published February 1929, reprinted August 1929. Preface. When my first out-of-the-body experiences occurred, I was but 12, so young and immature in mind that I did not realize their magnitude. The occurrences came about involuntarily and repeated themselves frequently until I became so accustomed to them that, as a matter of fact, I soon regarded them as nothing extraordinary and seldom mentioned them, even to members of my own family, to say nothing of keeping a record of them, although I had been urged to do so by many interested persons. I had been told by persons professing to know that conscious projection of the astral body was nothing unusual, and that many psychics could produce it at will. I too wanted to be able to produce it at will, and I admit that I was envious of those who, I had heard, could do so. So I began a search for someone who could produce the phenomenon voluntarily, but my search proved fruitless, and eventually I concluded that I could not find that someone. Thus I began to experiment with the phenomenon myself, and in this book you will find the results of my experiments. Although we are living in the 20th century, we still have with us the intolerance of the Middle Ages, and I am not optimistic enough to believe that a great many will read without prejudice what I have to say. I have written this work with the idea of giving the results of my findings to other students of the occult. Unfortunately, many occultists are of the belief that what is claimed to be conscious astral projection is nothing more nor less than a dream. I am well aware of the fact that one must first experience conscious astral projection before he can believe in it, and I confess that I should not accept it as true myself, perhaps, had I not experienced it and know it to be true. The skeptic says, I want the proof, the objective proof, then I will believe it. And the projector replies, you cannot have objective proof, you must experience it, then you will have the proof. The argument that the projector cannot prove to the skeptic that it is not a dream is of no avail, for neither can the skeptic prove to the projector that it is a dream. Thus argument is useless as arguing the matter of a first cause or a last effect. I stand on a clear-cut issue. I say, experience it. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. I have not tried to conceal anything, nor resorted to pseudo-arguments about the dangers involved, which is a common characteristic for most writers on the subject. I have given the specific methods for bringing about the projection of the astral body as I know them, and I am willing to have the truth of my statements judged squarely by the results obtained through the practice of these methods. You want proof, and I say you can have it, but you must experience it. You want to know how you can experience it, and I tell you how to go about it. I can do no more. In this volume I have related many of my experiences. However, the experiences I have given do not in any way represent all which I have had. A book this size could scarcely hold the accounts of all of them. I could never have gleaned the information which is contained herein by the few experiences which I have quoted. The average human being is not interested in the experiences of others. He is interested in his own experiences. And I have presupposed in writing this book that the reader wishes to know just how the phenomenon is produced, and not merely to read experiences. Although, as I have stated, I am not optimistic enough to believe that many will read what I have to say without prejudice. I am optimistic enough to believe that no one can give the methods which I have outlined a conscientious and thorough trial and not obtain results. Do not try to judge the book by reason alone. Judge it by experiment. I want no one to accept my word for what I have written. I say experience it, follow the formula, and judge the merits of my statements afterwards. That is the time to judge, afterwards, not in advance. I have been accused of being quote-unquote superstitious because of my belief in phantoms of the living and phantoms of the dead. Usually I find that many accusers are themselves superstitious on other subjects. Recently, a churchgoer told me that he did not understand how I or any other person could believe that he had a quote-unquote ghost inside him. Yet, this same critic professed to believe the Bible from cover to cover, even that Christ gave up the ghost at death. On the other hand, the materialist believes that it is superstition if anyone believes that the mind can exist apart from the brain. His theory is that brain quote-unquote oozes thoughts, just as the liver oozes bile. And the materialist, who cannot prove that the brain oozes thoughts, forgets that he cannot prove his argument and demands proof of the spiritists. If you press the materialist for proof, he will tell you that by experiment, remember, it becomes evident that the brain produces thought, and that is about the very thing the spiritist will tell you, that is, by experiment it is evident that the brain does not produce thought. Both materialist and spiritist must throw away quote-unquote reason and resort to experiment. And that is all I ask the reader to do, to convince himself of the merits of what I have written. Throw away reason and try experiment. It is my hope that all who are successful, even those who produce minor results by following the methods contained herein, will make those results known to me, for I wish to collect the evidence. I take this opportunity to express my thanks to Mr. Carrington for his valuable cooperation and assistance, and to my fiancée, Miss Goodrich, for her help in typing the manuscript. S.M. Introduction by Hereward Carrington. The astral body may be defined as the double or the ethereal counterpart of the physical body which it resembles and with which it normally coincides. It is thought to be composed of some semi-fluidic or subtle form of matter invisible to the physical eye. It has in the past been spoken of as the etheric body, the mental body, the spiritual body, the desire body, the radiant body, the resurrection body, the double, the luminous body, the subtle body, the fluidic body, the shining body, the phantom, and by various other names. In recent theosophical literature, distinctions have been made between these various bodies, but for our present purposes we may ignore these distinctions and speak of the astral body as a more subtle form, distinct from the organic structure known to Western science and studied by our physiologists. The broad general teaching is that every human being has an astral body just as he has a heart, a brain, and a liver. In fact, the astral body is more truly the real man than the physical body is, for the latter is merely a machine adapted to functioning upon the physical plane. But it must not be thought that the astral body is held to be the soul of man either. That is a mistake often made. It is said to be the vehicle of the soul, just as truly as the physical body is a vehicle, and constitutes one of the essential connecting links between mind and matter. To the materialist, of course, who regards mind merely as a product of certain brain activities, such a theory would appear superfluous and nonsensical, but the present book is not addressed to materialists. It is addressed to those who believe in the reality of certain supernormal psychical phenomena, and in the theoretical possibility, at least, of the astral body. To all such students, this book will, I am assured, prove a veritable mine of valuable and unique information. The doctrine. The astral body, then, coincides with the physical body during the hours of full waking consciousness. But in sleep, the astral body withdraws to a greater or lesser degree, usually hovering just above it, neither conscious nor controlled. In trance, syncope, while fainting, when under the influence of an anesthetic, etc., the astral body similarly withdraws from the physical. Such cases of withdrawal constitute instances of automatic or involuntary projection. As opposed to such cases, we place those of conscious or voluntary projection, in which the subject quote-unquote wills to leave his physical body and actually does so. He is then fully alert and conscious in his astral body. He can look upon his own physical mechanism and travel about at will, perhaps viewing scenes and visiting places he has never seen before. Subsequently, he can verify the truth of those experiences by visiting the scenes or places in question. While fully conscious in the astral body, he seems to be possessed of extraordinary supernormal powers. He can at will return to his physical body, or may be drawn into it again automatically by reason of some shock, fright, or vivid emotion. The astral and the physical bodies are invariably connected by means of a sort of cord or cable, along with which vital currents pass. Should this cord be severed, death instantly results. The only difference between astral projection and death is that the cord is intact in the former case and severed in the latter. This cord, the silver cord spoken of in Ecclesiastes, is elastic and capable of great extension. It constitutes the essential link between the two bodies. The above is a general and very brief summary of the doctrine and teachings regarding the astral body and its projection. Now, although the literature regarding the subject is fairly voluminous, I have been unable to find anywhere in it much material of scientific value, above all, next to nothing of a practical value, how to project the astral body. If such a body actually exists and can be projected voluntarily, as many individuals assert it can, why has so little practical advice and information ever been published regarding it? It's all very well to dwell upon the possible quote-unquote dangers connected with such a procedure. Every sensible person realizes that they may very well exist, but would be willing to try the experiment just the same. Nevertheless, it is next to impossible to obtain any practical and precise information from those individuals who assert that they can quote-unquote project at will. And in this, I feel sure psychic students everywhere will agree with me. Why should this be so? I quite agree with Mr. Mульдон in thinking that the reason for all this secrecy is not on account of the theoretical dangers involved, but simply because these self-styled teachers do not know. They know that astral projection occurs. They may have experienced it themselves, but the actual details of the process, how it is accomplished, this they do not know, and consequently cannot tell others. The great value of the present book consists in the fact that this information is given to the world for the first time, and I cannot but believe that we have here a document of the utmost value, information for which psychic students have waited for years, and which might never have been given out had not a combination of fortuitous circumstances rendered its publication possible. It may therefore be of interest to the reader to know how the following book came to be written, and something of the author himself. How this book came to be written. In my book Modern Psychical Phenomena, I had devoted a chapter to the experimental projection of the astral body, summarizing the work of M. Charles Lancelin, to be discussed more fully later on. This material I amplified considerably in a later book, Higher Psychical Development. This dealt almost exclusively with the work of others, however, and I always felt that it was most inadequate. It epitomized everything that I had been enabled to unearth, however, dealing with this important subject. In November 1927, I received a letter from Mr. Sylvan Mульdon, in which he said, "I have recently finished reading your volumes on the occult and psychical sciences. I was much interested in your chapter on astral projection, as I have been a projector for 12 years, long before I knew that anyone else in the world ever did such things. What puzzles me most is that you make the remark that M. Lancelin has told practically all that is known on the subject. Why, Mr. Carrington, I have never read Lancelin's work, but if you have given the gist of it in your book, then I can write a book on the things that Lancelin does not know. I have been wondering whether M. Lancelin is in fact a conscious projector. From what you have given, I have concluded either that Lancelin does not project at all, or that his subjects are not in the clear conscious state while exteriorized. Is this not reasonable? If M. Lancelin or his subjects were clearly conscious, could they not give every detail of the phenomenon? Of course they could, but they do not. Now I have been all through this, and I know every emotion, every move, every last detail that takes place from clear consciousness in the physical out into the astral with that same unchanged consciousness and back into coincidence. But the thing I marvel at most is that so little is said about the astral cord, the very foundation of the whole phenomenon. Is it possible that none of Lancelin's subjects ever examined this cord, nor even saw it? Nothing is told as to how this cord works, how it stabilizes the phantom or throws it into instability, how large it is while the bodies are nearly in coincidence, how it decreases in size and resistance up to a certain distance, which I have measured exactly, and so forth. Lancelin says that the phantom appears as if rocked by the wind, but he does not say what causes this. Lancelin does not tell how to control the astral cord, the mechanism which is the vital factor. He says that the astral body emerges from the solar plexus, which is anything but true. The body separates at all places simultaneously. The cord centers at a given plexus, and the ideal spot is the medulla oblongata, which has direct control over the organs of respiration in the oblivious physical body. Lancelin says nothing of suppressed desires and the condition of the heartbeat through the cord, nor how to stabilize the phantom after the exteriorization is accomplished. He says nothing of the form the phantom takes, how it moves in coming out, how a cataleptic state ensues while the phantom is under control of the subconscious mind and is still conscious. He has not told of the various degrees of sight and hearing in the phantom, nor how it travels, nor how it gets into a condition where it is helpless and unable to travel. The willpower part of the process is greatly overstressed. There are other ways of accomplishing this besides willpower, in fact several other ways. And the good health idea is nothing short of a blunder. I say, and can prove it, that the nearer dead a person is, the easier it is to project. I could go on telling you many more things about astral projection, but I suppose that after all was said, you would reply, prove it. But it cannot be so readily proved. It would require a treatise upon the subject. I once thought of writing a book upon this topic, but abandoned the idea when everyone told me that I was crazy, and found that no one would pay any attention to it. Just the same, I have exteriorized enough to know that if you have given the gist of what is now known, then indeed there is much darkness upon the subject. I might add that I am a boy of 25 years old, and that if you even read this letter and take it seriously, it will be an honor to me. It need hardly be pointed out that I realized at once that I had discovered someone possessed of a vast fund of most valuable information, and I lost no time in replying at length and in urging Mr. Mульдон to begin his book at once, which I promised to revise and edit and introduce. The following book is the result. I may say that Mr. Mульдон and I and myself have worked together upon it most harmoniously. He has covered many points and tried many experiments which I have suggested to him, and in every way demonstrated his complete sincerity and his scrupulous adherence to the truth. He makes no claims he cannot justify. He advances no theories which are not based upon actual experiences. If he does not know a certain thing, he frankly says so. The additional extracts from his letters will bring this out even more clearly, and will also furnish the reader much valuable material not included in the book. I may add that the bulk of this work was written by when Mr. Mульдон was so ill that he could not get out of bed, and was never certain but that the next day might prove his last. If ever a man may be expected to be truthful and sincere, it would be such a time. But the writer's truthfulness and sincerity are apparent in every line. I should like to draw the reader's attention particularly to the fact that no wild or preposterous claims are anywhere made in this book as to what has been accomplished during these quote-unquote astral trips. Mr. Mульдон does not claim to have visited any distant planets and returned to tell us in detail their modes of life. He does not claim to have explored any vast and beautiful spirit worlds. He does not pretend to have penetrated the past or the future, to have relived any of his past quote-unquote incarnations, to have read any Akashic records, to have traveled back along the stream of time and reviewed the history of mankind or the geologic eras of our earth. He asserts merely that he has been enabled to leave his physical body at will and travel about in the present, in his immediate vicinity, in some vehicle or other, while fully conscious. This is perfectly rational and is precisely what we should expect on the theory that these quote-unquote trips are actual experiences. Assuming that some such entity as an astral body exists and can at times be voluntarily detached from the physical body, everything else which is said falls naturally into place and is precisely what might be expected to happen under such circumstances. The difficulty of proof. Of course, it might be replied, very true, provided the reality of your astral body once be established. After once having swallowed the camel, it is useless straining at the gnat. But the evidence for the existence of some such entity as an astral or etheric body has been constantly accumulating, quite apart from these cases of conscious or voluntary quote-unquote projection. The very first thing which struck the early investigators of the Society for Psychical Research when they began their investigations was the great number of apparitions coinciding with the death of the person thus represented, and the result of the first census published in Phantasms of the Living, and of the second and far more extensive one published in Volume 10 of the SPR Proceedings, confirmed the belief that such coincidences were more than chance would account for, that there was some causal connection between the apparition and the death of the person whose quote-unquote double thus appeared. Quite logically, the attempt was made to explain the majority of these experiences as quote-unquote telepathic hallucinations. But all of them could not be so readily explained, and even as the result of the first census, Mr. Myers felt qualms as to the sufficiency of this explanation, as his note on a suggested mode of psychical interaction clearly shows. The evidence of the objectivity of certain phantoms appeared indeed so strong that Mr. Andrew Lang was forced to write in his Cock Lane and Common Sense, page 206, "Some apparitions are ghosts, real objective entities filling space." And it may be said that the evidence for this has considerably increased of late years, quite aside from quote-unquote materializations and similar manifestations. Into this evidence we have not, unfortunately, the time to enter now. It may be asserted, therefore, with considerable confidence that the evidence for the existence of some sort of an astral body has been constantly accumulating as a result of our psychical investigations, and that this evidence is now very strong. It need hardly be pointed out that if this were once definitely accepted, it would enable us to account for a large number of otherwise baffling phenomena very readily: haunted houses, apparitions seen by several persons at the same time, psychic photographs, clairvoyance, etc. And, assuming that such a body might occasionally move or affect matter, raps, telekinesis, poltergeists, and other psychical phenomena. In fact, once the objective existence of an astral body be postulated, a flood of light would be thrown upon psychic manifestations, both psychical and mental. Now, quite apart from such collateral evidence, there have always been individuals who have asserted that they could leave the physical body at will and travel about in time in some astral body for a longer or shorter period of time, retaining consciousness throughout. The difficulty has always consisted in furnishing proofs of such claims. Indeed, this is a most difficult thing to do in view of the fact that the experience must of necessity be subjective, and it's an open question whether such proofs have been furnished even in the present book. However, the attempt has been made to do so, and the specific instructions which have been given will perhaps enable others to project themselves, thereby affording them the best possible means of verifying the accuracy of the statements made. Should a number of otherwise sensible persons come forward and assert that they too have succeeded in voluntarily projecting their astral bodies, this question would at once assume a very different status. In the present book, Mr. Mульdон has discussed both falling and flying dreams, and has advanced the ingenious theory that many of these may be due to actual movements of the astral body. Of course, Mr. Mульdon would be the first to admit that the majority of such dreams are due to ordinary psychological, even physiological causes, and as examples of quote-unquote illusions of levitation produced by such purely psychological mechanisms, I cannot do better than summarize the interesting articles of Mr. Lydiard H. Horton, which appeared in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, April 1918, June 1918, August 1919, in which he attempted to prove this fact, that such illusions of levitation may be so produced even without sleep. Upon the degree of relaxation thus attained depends the success of the experiment. If the patient can induce this complete relaxation of the muscular system without falling asleep, he will often experience an illusion of levitation. Out of the 30 subjects who relaxed completely, and of the 20 or so who retained consciousness after they had completely relaxed, 8 of them reported illusions of levitation. The following are typical experiences of this nature. One of them jumped out of the chair and was afraid to continue the experiment, so realistic was his perception of a soaring motion. Another, this time a woman, gripped the chair in the momentary belief that she was floating away. 2 others reported that they felt caught up by a wave, but that their reason reassured them at the time. One other enjoyed the sensation so much that he took it as a matter of course and supposed it was part of the treatment. One other said that if his head had been as light as his body, he would surely have floated away. He reported himself just floating away, the sensation being overwhelmingly real. Mr. Horton attempts to account for all such cases as follows. The mechanism underlying the flying dream and the levitation illusion is attributed mainly to the functions of the adrenal sympathetic nervous system. The genesis of the illusion of levitation does not come from the diminution of tactile sensations, whether due entirely to an inhibition in the course of the pressure sense tracts, deep sensibility or merely to lessening of actual muscle pressure is a question. I think the latter is a great factor, but that the sensory inhibition is real too. This of itself does not become the adequate or efficient basis of the illusion of levitation till the vasomotor relaxation supervenes. Out of the combination there arises the bodily stimulus, negative in this case, which becomes the foundation of the illusion of soaring. This attempted explanation, it will be observed, differs essentially from that offered by Horace G. Hutchinson in his Dreams and Their Meanings, and also that of Havelock Ellis in his World of Dreams, which is that flying dreams are best explained by a combination of respiratory sensations together with cutaneous anesthesia. It is quite possible that some such explanation may ultimately be found for and will adequately explain many ordinary flying dreams, but it must be emphasized emphatically that such dreams are quite different from clean-cut instances of projection, and that any explanation of the latter by such principles is absolutely unjustified. Just as unjustified as, for example, the attempt to explain the supernormal knowledge displayed in Mrs. Piper's trance by postulating some physiological causation of that trance. The essential problem would remain untouched. In all cases of astral projection, it must be emphasized that clear consciousness of self is maintained by the subject while he is outside his body. He can look back and see his body. He can view his present surroundings. He can observe people and note distant scenes and events just as they are or are occurring, which he could not possibly have seen and known, but which he was afterwards enabled to verify and check off as correct. This is the distinctly supernormal factor involved, which is the crux of the whole matter, and for this no purely physiological explanation in any way accounts. In his experiments, Dr. Horton succeeded only in producing the illusion of levitation, which is not even a flying dream. And a flying dream is, according to Mr. Muldoon, again an entirely different matter from a conscious projection. Historical. It is hardly necessary to remind the reader that the Egyptians believed implicitly in the Ka, which might be said to correspond to our conception of the astral body. This Ka was not the soul of man, it must be understood, but its vehicle, just as the astral body is thought to be the vehicle of the mind and soul today. It was this Ka which visited the mummified body from time to time and was usually depicted as a sort of bird-like double of the deceased. Many of the older Egyptian paintings show this. The wanderings and trials of the dead man in the underworld are described at a great length in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and in other early writings. Even more striking and important from our own point of view, however, is the recently translated Tibetan Book of the Dead, edited by Dr. W. Y. Evans Wentz and published by the Oxford University Press, 1927. This work, the Bardo Tadol, was probably first committed to writing in the 8th century AD and embodied teachings much older. The manuscript from which the present translation is made is judged by experts to be between 150 and 200 years old. As the reader may have surmised, it deals with the same general topic as the earlier Egyptian work, but from our modern point of view is far more rational, and many of its teachings correspond in a remarkable way with those of occult and psychical science. A very brief summary of those portions of the book which deal more or less directly with our theme will doubtless prove of interest. When a man is about to die, a lama is called in, whose duty it is to attend to the dying man and usher him properly into the next world. The arteries on the sides of the neck are pressed. This is done to keep the dying person conscious, with the consciousness rightly directed. For the nature of the death consciousness determines the future state of the soul complex, existence being the continuous transformation of one conscious state to another. The pressing of the arteries regulates the paths to be taken by the outgoing vital current, prana. The proper path is that which passes through the foramen of Monroe. If the expiration is about to cease, turn the dying one over on the right side, which posture is called the lying posture of a lion. The throbbing of the arteries on the right and left sides of the throat is to be pressed if the person dying be disposed to sleep, or if the sleeping state advances, that should be arrested, and the arteries pressed gently but firmly. Thereby the vital force will not be able to return from the median nerve, and will be sure to pass out through the Brahmanic aperture. Now the real setting face to face is to be applied. At this moment, the first glimpsing of the bardo, of the clear light of reality, is experienced by all sentient beings. All the time the patient is dying, the Lama urges him to keep his mind tranquil and poised, so that he may see and enter into the clear light of reality and may not be troubled with hallucinations or thought forms which have no objective existence save in his own mind. The Lama superintends the whole process of withdrawal of the astral body from the physical at death. It is commonly held that the process of separation takes from 3½ to 4 days, unless assisted by a priest called Baba, or extractor of the consciousness principle, and that even if the priest be successful in the extracting, the deceased ordinarily does not wake up to the fact of being separated from the human body until the set period of time has elapsed. If the mind of the dying person has not been properly concentrated upon the clear light, he is liable to see scores of devils and demons of all sorts, but it is emphasized over and over again in the book that these demons have no actual objective existence. They are mere hallucinations or thought forms, having no actuality save in the mind of the seer. They are all purely symbolical. The mind is capable of manufacturing these, or creating them just as we do every night in our dreams. He must cleave his way through these into the clear light of the void. The sooner he can do this, the sooner is liberation attained. The teachings concerning the astral body are very clear and concise. When thou wert recovered from the swoon of death, thy knower must have risen up in its primordial condition, and a radiant body resembling the former body must have sprung forth. It is called the desire body. The bardo body has been spoken of as endowed with all sense faculties. Unimpeded motion implieth that thy present body, being only a desire body, is not a body of gross matter. Thou art actually endowed with the power of miraculous motion. Ceaselessly and involuntarily wilt thou be wandering about. To all those who are weeping thou shalt say, Here I am, weep not. But they not hearing thee, thou wilt think, I am dead. And again, at that time thou wilt be feeling very miserable. Be not miserable in that way. There will be a grey, twilight-like light, both by night and by day, and at all times. Even though thou seekest a body, thou wilt gain nothing but trouble. Put aside the desire for a body, and permit thy mind to abide in the state of resignation, and act so as to abide therein. These are the indications of the wanderings about on the Siddha Bardo of the mental body. At the time, happiness and misery will depend upon karma. The literature of the subject. Much has been written in the past concerning the astral body, mostly in books devoted to magic and occultism. I believe that I have gone through the majority of such works carefully in my endeavor to find some practical information bearing upon this question, but with little result. Thus, there are numerous references to the astral body in, for example, Eliphas Levi's Doctrine and Ritual of Magic, in his Key of the Mysteries published in the Equinox, Volume 10, in A. E. Waite's Mysteries of Magic and his Occult Sciences, in Dr. Franz Hartmann's Magic, White and Black, and in the various writings of Paracelsus. In the older works upon sorcery and witchcraft, there are, of course, frequent allusions to astral projection. Theosophical literature is full of the subject, but even here I have been unable to find anywhere precise information, any practical instructions as to how the projection of the astral body is to be accomplished. This is true not only of the older books, such as Leadbeater's The Astral Plane, Annie Besant's Man and His Bodies, but also the newer and more voluminous treatises such as those of Major Arthur E. Powell, The Etheric Double, The Astral Body, The Mental Body, etc. In all these books, much theoretical information is given, of course from the strictly theosophical point of view, but very little practical advice. The same criticism applies to Dacier's book, Posthumous Humanity, a study of phantoms. Some interesting spontaneous experiences are given in Little Journeys into the Invisible of Women's Actual Experiences in the Fourth Dimension by M. Gifford Chine. Some Occult Experiences by Johann van Manen. My Travels in the Spirit World by Caroline D. Larson, and in other books of the kind. While some curious lore of a general nature is contained in The Astral Light by Nizida, an interesting historic study of the subject is given by G.R.S. Mead's Doctrine of the Subtle Body in Western Tradition, in which he summarizes the views of the early fathers as well as the later conceptions. Charles Hallock's book Luminous Bodies, Here and Hereafter contains little to the point. Occasional references to what Mr. Myers in his Human Personality called self-projection may be found scattered throughout the journals and proceedings of the SPR, and the very striking case of Dr. Will's Proceedings 8, pages 180 to 194, is of course classical. The case of the Reverend L.J. Bertrand, pages 194 to 200, is also of considerable interest, while the same may be said of the case recorded by Dr. I.K. Funk in his Psychic Riddle, pages 179 to 185. Mr. A. Campbell Holmes has some remarks upon the double in his Facts of Psychic Science and Philosophy, while I have devoted chapters to the subject in my Modern Psychical Phenomena and Higher Psychical Development. Several years ago, Mr. Prescott Hall published in the Journal of the ASPR a number of communications of considerable interest which he had received regarding the astral body through the instrumentality of a blind medium. Their value, of course, depends altogether upon the authenticity of their source. This is practically all the published material which I have been enabled to find relative to the astral body and its projection, with the exception of Mr. Oliver Fox's articles in the Occult Review, to be quoted presently, and 2 books in French. These are Le Fantôme des Vivants by H. D'Urville and Méthode de dédoublement personnel, Exterioration de la Neuricita, Sorties and Astral by M. Charles Lancelin. These will be quoted and referred to more fully later on, but as I have said, with these exceptions, I have found practically nothing of value in the entire literature of the subject, and this criticism is especially true when we come to the most important and central theme of all, that is, how to project the astral body experimentally and retain consciousness within it. Upon this vital theme, our authorities are especially silent. It is just here that Mr. Mульdон is most explicit. He explains in the greatest detail just how the projection of the astral body is to be effected, and he describes precisely what takes place in the subject's mind and body during such a projection, together with many other details connected with the process. Any impartial reader will agree, I think, with the conclusion that it would be impossible for Mr. Mульdon to have written as he has, to have acquired this knowledge without in some sense experiencing what he claims to have experienced. His reading upon the subject has been very scant. His contact with anyone liable to possess even a tithe of this information is next to impossible when we take into account the fact that he lives in an obscure village in the Middle West. No, his knowledge has been gained at first hand and as the result of actual experimentation. That is very evident. How such information could have been acquired, had he not actually undergone these experiences, I leave it for the reader to decide. Introduction. Spontaneous cases. As before mentioned, there are two types or varieties of astral projection: the spontaneous and the experimental. In the former, the individual undergoing the experience merely finds himself projected without knowing how or why. He finds himself outside his own physical body, which he can clearly see, but how he got there he does not know. In the latter, the experimenter makes a determined and voluntary effort to project, usually to some definite locality, and wakes up to find himself there or en route. Of course, the vast majority of such attempts end in failure. Successes are extremely rare. Or the subject may be seen by some individual at the locality in question and remain quite unconscious of his apparent success. Examples of all types or varieties of projection are to be found in this book, together with an analysis of the modus operandi involved and an explanation of the process or failure of the success or failure, as the case may be. Let us consider first of all a few typical cases of spontaneous projection. As before stated, this may occur theoretically when the subject is asleep, in trance, while under the influence of an anesthetic, etc. Or it may occur when the subject is awake and conscious but merely relaxed, at least at the beginning of the experience. A good illustration of this may be found in a recently published book entitled My Travels in the Spirit World by Caroline D. Larson, where we read, "Suddenly I underwent a very strange experience. A feeling of deep oppression and apprehension came over me, not unlike that which precedes a fainting spell. I braced myself against it, but to no avail. The overpowering oppression deepened, and soon numbness crept over me until every muscle became paralyzed. In this condition I remained for some time. My mind, however, was still working as clearly as ever. At first I heard the music downstairs plainly, but soon the sounds began to slip away from me by degrees until finally everything became a blank, and I was unconscious to life and the world. How long this state lasted I do not know. What happened during this period I am unable to relate. The next thing I knew was that I myself was standing on the floor beside my bed, looking down attentively at my own physical body lying in it. I recognized every line of that familiar face, pale and still as in death, the eyes tightly closed and the mouth partly open. The arms and hands rested limp and lifeless beside the body. I turned and walked slowly towards the door, passed through it, and into a hall that led to the bathroom. Through force of habit, I went through the motions of turning on the electric light, which of course I did not actually turn on. But there was no need for illumination. From my body and face emanated a strong whitish light that lighted up the room brilliantly. In the case published by Dr. I.K. Funk in his Psychic Riddle, pages 179 to 185, the writer describes how he lost control of his body by reason of cold numbness, which spread over it on a number of occasions, before having his first conscious projection. On the occasion in question, after these preliminary symptoms, he first of all became momentarily unconscious. There came a flashing of lights in my eyes and a ringing in my ears, and it seemed for an instant as though I had become unconscious. When I came out of this state, I seemed to be walking in the air. No words can describe the exhilaration and freedom that I experienced. No words can describe the clearness of mental vision. At no time in my life had my mind been so clear or so free. I became conscious of being in a room and looking down on a body propped up in bed, which I recognized as my own. I cannot tell what strange feelings came over me. This body, to all intents and purposes, looked to be dead. There was no indication of life about it, and yet here I was, apart from the body, with my mind thoroughly clear and alert, and the consciousness of another body to which matter of any kind offered no resistance. After what might have been a minute or two, looking at the body, I began to try and control it, and in a very short time all sense of separation from the physical body ceased, and I was only conscious of a directed effort towards its use. After what seemed to be quite a long time, I was able to move, got up from the bed and dressed myself, and went out to breakfast. As to the criticism invariably advanced that this was a mere vivid dream, the writer says, I know that many people may think that the statements recorded here are simply the result of an active imagination or perhaps a dream, but they are neither the one nor the other. If the whole world were to rise up, it would not make one particle of difference in my mind, so I'm absolutely certain that I have been as free from my physical body as I ever will be, and that my life apart from it was far more wonderful than any life I have experienced in it. The case of Dr. Wells is very well known. It was first printed in the St. Louis Medical and Surgical Journal, November 1889, and afterwards in Volume 8 of the SPR Proceedings. It was also published in part in Human Personality, Volume 2, pages 315 to 322. In view of this, only a few brief extracts from the most interesting case will be given, referring the reader to the above sources for the full account. After a few preliminary remarks and descriptions, Dr. Wills goes on to say, with all the interest of a physician, I beheld the wonders of my bodily anatomy, intimately interwoven with which, even tissue for tissue, was I, the living soul of that dead body. I watched the interesting process of the separation of soul and body. By some power, apparently not my own, the ego was rocked to and fro, laterally, as a cradle is rocked, by which process its connection with the tissues of the body was broken up. After a little time, the latter motion ceased, and along the soles of the feet, beginning at the toes, passing rapidly to the heels, I felt and heard, as it seemed, the snapping of innumerable small cords. When this was accomplished, I began slowly to retreat from the feet towards the head, as a rubber cord shortens. As I emerged from the head, I floated up and down, and laterally like a soap bubble, attached to the bowl of a pipe, until I at last broke loose from the body and fell lightly to the floor, where I slowly rose and expanded into the full stature of a man. I seemed to be translucent, of a bluish cast, and perfectly naked. I directed my gaze to the bed, and saw my own dead body. It was lying just as I had taken so much pains to place it, partially upon the right side, the feet close together and the hands clasped across the breast. I was surprised at the paleness of the face. I turned and passed out of the open door. Dr. Wells then relates a number of mental experiences which he had during his extended trip, including the perception of certain things which he did not know existed, but which were subsequently verified and found correct. And at the conclusion of his astral journey, he was suddenly arrested by what appeared to be a dense black cloud. A small, densely black cloud appeared in front of me and advanced towards my face. I knew that I was to be stopped. I felt the power to move or to think leaving me. My hands felt powerless to my sides, my shoulders and head dropped forward. The cloud touched my face and I knew no more. When he regained consciousness, he was in his own physical body. The case of Reverend L.J. Bertrand, also given in Proceedings, Volume 8, page 194, is thus summarized by Mr. Myers. During a dangerous ascent of the Titlis, Mr. Bertrand, separated from his companions, sat down to rest and became paralyzed by the cold. His head, however, remained clear, and he experienced the sensation described by Dr. Wells of passing out of his body and remained attached to it by a kind of elastic string. While in this condition, he had clairvoyant impressions about his absent companions and much astonished them on their return by describing their doings to them. Experimental cases. We now come to cases of voluntary or experimental projection. These, as I have said, are much rarer and, apart from a few scattered cases, possibly in Phantasms of the Living, are limited more or less to Mr. Fox's records in the Occult Review, to be quoted presently, and a few dubious and historic cases fairly remote. 2 books have been published in French, however, dealing with the subject, one by M. Charles Lancelin, the other by M. Hector D'Urville. Both of these works deal with the attempt to extract, as it were, the astral body from the magnetized subject while in a state of trance. Neither of them contains cases of self-projection. The subject was placed in a deep magnetic or mesmeric, as distinct from hypnotic trance, and suggestions were then given that the subject should if possible leave his or her own body and move away from it for some appreciable distance. A variety of ingenious experimental tests were then made to ascertain as far as possible that this had been successfully accomplished. I shall not now stop to consider the work of M. Lancelin, as I have already summarized it quite fully in my Modern Psychical Phenomena and in Higher Psychical Development, and Mr. Muldoon has dealt with it at considerable length in the present volume. I may, however, give a brief summary of the findings of M. D'Urville, as given in his book La Fantôme des Vivants. The book is divided into 2 parts, part 1 being historical and theoretical, dealing with the general theory of the double, and citing a number of ancient and more modern cases which might possibly be considered examples of its manifestation. Part 2 is experimental, dealing with cases in which the astral body was apparently projected while the subject was in deep magnetic trance. Some of this material is of considerable interest and agrees remarkably with the descriptions and experiences of Mr. Muldoon. Thus we read, page 189. The subject of the experiment is constantly en rapport with the double through the intermediary of a fluidic cord capable of elongation. Usually this is cylindrical, but may sometimes appear to be a sort of ribbon. As to the clothes of the phantom, these seem to be composed of a sort of fluidic gauze, page 215. Various sense impressions are conveyed to the body by means of the astral cord, page 235. The question of temperature is important, and too much light has a detrimental effect upon the astral body. Experiments with the dynamometer showed that the muscular strength grip of the subject was always greater after projection than before, page 152. On the contrary, the temperature of the hand, particularly of the right hand, almost invariably fell as the result of the experiment, pages 195 to 197. One chapter is devoted to the action of the phantom upon the double of another subject, both being projected at the same time, and B, upon the physical body of another person. Some positive results were apparently secured in both cases. Calcium sulfide screens were then placed at some distance from the subject, and the suggestion was given that the phantom should approach one or other of these screens. As it did so, the screen in question glowed up with added brilliance as the result of the proximity of the astral body, pages 275 to 280. Some successes are also reported on obtaining physical movements of objects and wraps, and in moving the straw of a stenometer at a distance from the entranced subject by the projected astral body, pages 297 to 332. The last chapter details a number of attempts to photograph the astral body and various vital radiations emitted by it or by the physical body. Miss M. D'Urville concludes his book as follows. First, projection of the astral body is a certain fact capable of being demonstrated by means of direct experiment. This also demonstrates to us that living force is independent of matter, and that our individuality is composed of a physical body and an intelligent soul, and a vital link, the astral body. Second, since this phantom can exist and function apart from the physical body, it may also exist after death. That is, immortality is a fact which is thus proved scientifically. This apparently little-known work of M. D'Urville is full of curious and interesting material, and if one could be assured that the results attained were all scientifically accurate, would constitute a treatise of first-rate importance. It is to be noted that many of his findings tally in a very striking manner with those of Mr. Mульдон. Some critical comments on these results are to be found in the text of the present book. Mr. Oliver Fox experiences. The only detailed scientific and first-hand account of a series of conscious and voluntarily controlled astral projections which I have ever come across is that by Mr. Oliver Fox, published in the Occult Review for 1920, pages 256 to 264, 317 to 327. These articles were entitled respectively The Pineal Doorway and Beyond the Pineal Door, and embodied the author's personal experiences. I shall endeavor to summarize very briefly, quoting a few especially important passages verbatim. Mr. Fox very logically begins by placing squarely before the reader the two alternate theories which might be advanced to account for his experiences. These are A. exceptionally vivid dreams, and B. real projections. Which of these is the correct explanation? Mr. Fox admits that it's extremely difficult to prove the latter theory objectively, and therefore thinks it wiser to confine himself to a description of his own experiences and a summary of his own methods of development, hoping that others might possibly obtain the same results by following his advice, thereby proving the reality of astral projection for themselves. The first step, says Mr. Fox, consists in acquiring a certain dream control, but not the same kind of dream control as that detailed in the present book. It consists in acquiring, by observing some incongruity or anachronism, the knowledge that one is dreaming. I quote Mr. Fox's own words. 18 years ago, when I was a student at a technical college, a dream impelled me to start my research. I dreamed simply that I was standing outside my home. Looking down, I discovered that the paving stones had mysteriously changed their position. The long sides were now parallel to the curb instead of perpendicular to it. Then the solution flashed upon me. Though that glorious summer morning seemed as real could be, I was dreaming. Instantly, the vividness of life increased 100-fold. Never had sea and sky and trees shone with such glamorous beauty. Even the commonplace houses seemed alive and mystically beautiful. Never had I felt so absolutely well, so clear-brained, so divinely powerful. Verily, the world had become my oyster. The sensation was exquisite beyond words, but it lasted only a few moments, and I awoke. As I was to learn later, my mental control had been overwhelmed by my emotions, so the tiresome body asserted its claim and pulled me back. And now I had a, to me, wonderful new idea. Was it possible to regain at will the glory of the dream? Could I prolong my dreams? I have italicized the heading of this section. It sounds simple, but in practice I found it one of the most difficult things imaginable. 100 times would I pass the most glaring incongruities, and then, at last, some inconsistency would tell me that I was dreaming, and always the knowledge brought the change I have described. I found that I was then able to do little tricks at will, levitate, pass through seemingly solid walls, mold matter into new forms, etc. But in these early experiments, I could stay out of my body only for a very short time, and this dream consciousness could be acquired only at intervals of several weeks. To begin with, my progress was very slow, but presently I made 2 more discoveries. First, the mental effect of prolonging the dream produced a pain in the region of the pineal gland, dull at first, but rapidly increasing in intensity, and I knew instinctively that this was a warning to me to resist no longer the call of my body. Second, in the last moments of prolonging the dream, and while I was subject to the above pain, I experienced a sense of dual consciousness. I could feel myself standing in the dream and see the scenery, but at the same time, I could feel myself lying in bed and see my bedroom. As the call of the body grew stronger, the dream scenery became more faint, but by asserting my will to remain dreaming, I could make the bedroom fade and the dream scenery regain its apparent solidity. The thought then occurred to Mr. Fox, what would happen if he were to disregard this pain and quote-unquote force his dream consciousness still further? Not without some trepidation he finally did so. A sort of click occurred in his brain, and he found himself locked out in his dream. He no longer seemed connected with his physical body. The sense of dual consciousness vanished. The ordinary sense of time likewise disappeared, and he found himself free in a new world. This was his first conscious projection. It lasted only a short time. Owing partly to the sense of utter loneliness, he experienced a sort of panic. Instantly, the same strange cerebral click was heard, and Mr. Fox found himself back in his physical body, completely cataleptic. Very gradually, he regained control of his organism, moving first one muscle and then another. Suddenly, the trance broke, my eyes opened, and I was free. I jumped out of bed with great joy and immediately collapsed upon the floor, being overwhelmed with nausea. I felt ill for 2 or 3 days afterwards. Just here, Mr. Fox enumerates what appeared to him to be the possible dangers connected with these experiments. These are heart failure or insanity arising from shock, premature burial, obsession, severance of cord, repercussion effects upon the physical vehicle. Of course, as Mr. Fox wisely remarks, the last 3 of these would be scorned by the orthodox scientist. It may be added here that all these dangers are more imaginary than real and are dealt with very fully in the present book. The chief characteristics of these astral projections Mr. Fox summarizes thus. First, the body appears to be in a semi-rigid condition, which may approach in severity the seeming cataleptic state already described. Second, Though the eyes are closed, the room is plainly visible, and the atmosphere also, so that one gets an effect rather like particles of dust illuminated by the sun, or roughly a golden glow, very variable in its intensity. Behind this, as it were, and only just on the borderline of visibility, is something like a mass of frogs' eggs, bluish-gray in color and vibrating. Third, physical sounds are distinctly audible. Fourth, in this condition one is liable to any imaginable hallucination or sight or sound, or to voice the other view. One is both clairvoyant and clairaudient. Fifth, in this condition, especially if it be mistaken for the waking state, one falls an easy prey to wild and unreasonable fear. Sixth, one is conscious of strange atmospheric stresses, the before a storm feeling, but enormously intensified. So far, Mr. Fox had never succeeded in effecting a true projection without any break in consciousness. He always felt that someone or something was holding him back. It was like getting past the dweller on the threshold. Then the solution of the problem suddenly occurred to him. I had to force my incorporeal self through the doorway of the pineal gland so that it clicked behind me. It was done when in the trance condition simply by concentrating upon the pineal gland and willing to ascend through it. The sensation was as follows. My incorporeal self rushed to a point in the pineal gland and hurled itself against the imaginary trapdoor, while the golden light increased in brilliance so that it seemed the whole room burst into flame. If the impetus was insufficient to take me through, then the sensation became reversed. My incorporeal self subsided and became again coincident with my body, while the astral light died down to normal. Often 2 or 3 attempts were required before I could generate sufficient willpower to carry me through. It felt as though I were rushing to insanity and death, but once the little door had clicked behind me, I enjoyed a mental clarity far surpassing that of earth life, and the fear was gone. Leaving the body was then as easy as getting out of bed. Mr. Fox, with admirable scientific caution, warns his readers against taking what he has said about the pineal gland too literally, but he asserts that these are the exact sensations, and he believes that what he has said is not far from the truth. In the vast majority of his experiences, Mr. Fox asserts that there was a break in consciousness, seemingly for only a few moments, between his attempt to enter the quote-unquote pineal door and his fully conscious state outside the physical body. He did ultimately succeed, however, in attaining a number of projections fully conscious from the beginning, as he himself states. This then was the climax of my research. I could now pass from ordinary waking life into this new state of consciousness, or from life to death, and return without any mental break. It is easily written, but it took 14 years to accomplish. Mr. Fox mentions 3 different methods of quote-unquote locomotion in the astral body. The first of these is horizontal gliding, accomplished by a purely mental effort. Usually this is easy, but when the pull of the cord is felt, it's anything but effortless. It is as though one tugged against a rope of very strong elastic. Mr. Fox also observed that whenever he was pulled back into the body, he had the sensation of being drawn backwards into it. The reason for this feeling is fully explained in this book. The second method of locomotion is a variety of levitation, very similar to the typical flying dream. This is described as easy and harmless. The third method is what Mr. Fox calls scrying, and in this he appears to shoot upwards like a rocket with great velocity. It is described as difficult and dangerous. A typical experience of this sort is given in the article referred to. As to the people encountered in these astral trips, Mr. Fox notes first the total absence of elementals or other terrifying beings so often said to inhabit the astral plane, and second, the fact that he is nearly always invisible to them, though his presence may at times be felt. He points out, however, that this is always unfortunate, for when such is the case, the entity is shocked and frightened, and the state produces a corresponding shock within himself, the result of which is to draw him back into his physical body immediately. The reasons for all this will be made very clear in the text of the present book. As to the scenery, this was almost always similar to that seen on earth, though of course unfamiliar scenes were very common, probably more common than familiar ones. One very curious and unusual feature about Mr. Fox's experiences is that he was never able to see his own body when projected, though he could see his wife's body, for example, very plainly. This is almost the only instance on record, so far as I know, in which this has been the case. Generally, the physical body of the projector is the first object seen. In this, Mr. Fox's experience is almost unique. On the whole, however, his impressions and experiences are quite typical and tally with those of other investigators in this field, as will be brought out more fully later on. Lack of space, unfortunately, prevents me from recounting the very dramatic and extraordinary manner in which Mr. Fox lost this power after having acquired it with so much effort and diligence. This may be found in full in the articles referred to, from which this summary has been drawn. Some personal experiences. I may perhaps conclude this section by giving a brief account of a few attempts of my own, made some years ago, at astral projection. These were undertaken when I was experimenting in yoga. On a number of occasions I willed to appear to a certain young lady, naturally quite psychic, just as I was falling asleep. Most of these attempts were apparent failures, but on 3 occasions she awoke suddenly and saw me standing in the room or sitting on her bed. I remained visible for a few seconds, then melted away. I was quite unconscious of any seeming success on any occasion. I merely awakened in the morning as usual, not knowing whether anything had happened or not. These experiences extended over a period of several weeks, and it is hardly necessary to say that I never gave the slightest inkling of the time selected for trying these projections. Of course, whilst these may have been actual unconscious projections, they may also have been purely subjective experiences, perhaps telepathically initiated. But one experience was quite striking and should perhaps be recorded in greater detail. I may state that the young lady in question is an accomplished pianist and has a phenomenal musical memory. If she has once played or heard a piece of music, she never forgets it. This is important for reasons which will be apparent later. One day, I asked her if she had ever heard of an old song, "When Sparrows Build," made famous years ago by Jenny Lind, and a favorite of my childhood days. She stated that she never had. I said that I would get and send her a copy sometime, as I thought she would like it. That was all that was said about it at the time, and no particular importance was attached to it. A couple of nights later, I attempted to appear to her, and, as usual, awoke in the morning without knowing whether my experiment had succeeded or not. A little later, I received a telephone call, and the young lady in question informed me that I had appeared to her the night before, rather more vividly than usual, and that she had thereupon been seized with an impulse to write automatically, the result being a verse of poetry. That afternoon I called, was told of the experience, was shown the poetry, and confessed that I received quite a momentary thrill. The poetry consisted of the opening lines of the song "When Sparrows Build," absolutely accurate with the exception of one word. I merely record the above case for what it may be worth, since I can furnish no proof, and the whole incident may have been merely a case of remarkable coincidence. Personally, I doubt that it was. However, I shall not press the point, being content to record it as illustrative of the curious results one is able to obtain while experimenting in this baffling field. As we have seen, other experimenters have had far more striking and convincing results. I must now draw this introduction to a close. It has been my privilege to work with Mr. Mульdон throughout the writing and preparation of this book, and I have added a few footnotes from time to time and suggested certain experiments which might be tried or certain points which might be covered. Apart from these, the writing of the body of the book has been his work entirely, and I feel that the psychic world owes him a deep debt of gratitude for his self-sacrifice and determination in undertaking the labor involved in writing it when ill, in bed, and in great physical pain. I desire to record here my complete conviction of his sincerity, his truthfulness, and his remarkably detached and scientific attitude toward his experiences, all of which will, I feel assured, be evident in the book itself. It's a work of the utmost importance and is just a sort of book for which psychic students the world over have long waited. Hereward Carrington. Extracts from Mr. Mульdon's letters. The following extracts from letters written to me by Mr. Mульdon contain much interesting material not found in the text of the book itself. They serve to throw an interesting sidelight upon the writer's psychology. And inasmuch as this is highly important in a case such as this, I feel assured that their inclusion is fully warranted for this, if for no other reason. It is hardly necessary to say that these extracts have been made with Mr. Mульdon's permission. The phraseology of the writer, as shown in these letters as well as in parts of the book itself, is also of interest and will serve as a further indication of his inner self. These letters were, of course, written to me during the writing and revision of the present book. H.C. Extracts from letters. You ask me if I have ever touched the physical body while in the astral body. No, this is difficult to do. I have tried it, and I find that one cannot keep from interiorizing because of the very close range. Did you ever attend a materialization seance where you try to hold the spirit from getting back into the cabinet? Well, if you have ever met with that tremendous magnetic pull, you will realize how hard it is to keep from interiorizing when one gets close enough to the physical body to meddle with it. You have asked me too if I have ever seen anything while in the astral which I did not know existed and later verified by seeing it in the physical. Certainly, this is nothing unusual to do while consciously projected. I have often gone into houses and noted the things, later going there in the physical and seeing everything exactly as I saw in the astral. But when in coincidence, I have never had a clairvoyant vision in my life, not one. The only way I ever was able to see astrally was in the astral body. When in the physical body, I couldn't see a spirit if there were 1,000,000 of them in the room. Seeing inside a box would be no trouble, although I have never tried to do so while exteriorized. It just never occurred to me, but I have seen right inside houses and have seen people in them, etc., without ever going inside. On a table in the parlor of my home there stands a little device which is used to beat time for a pupil learning music, a metronome. All one has to do to make this device work is to start the pendulum, and it will click very loudly until the spring runs down. I sleep in a room next to the parlor. The other night I dreamed that I stood very near to this device. In the dream, I seemed about to start the metronome. No sooner had I dreamed this than I awoke in my physical body in bed. About 1 second later, the device in the next room started to click, click, click. Now there is no possible way in which that device can start itself. Further, it has stood on the table for months without being used. It seemed that no sooner had I touched it in the dream than I awoke and heard it start clicking in the next room. Were it not for the time element, I should have been inclined to think that I started this in the dream body, which of course is the astral body in a partially conscious condition. but it did not start until I was awake in the physical, though I started it in the dream an instant before. Could it be possible that the motivity traveled to the device while I dreamt of it, remained there until after I was conscious, and started it then? If I had been projected in the astral body, would not the device have started before I got back into the physical? I wonder if it's possible to do something of that sort, to try and move something in the astral body and not have it move until some time after the astral body has left it. What I have just told you was written several days ago. Last night I again started the metronome in a dream, just as I did the first time. Now I have tried to move things while projected and conscious, but never could. And the strange part is that I never made such a suggestion to myself. The dream occurred both times spontaneously. If only I could do this intentionally. What I cannot understand is this: why the device did not start until about 2 seconds after I dreamt of starting it. The metronome is about 15 feet from where I sleep. There is a wall between, of course, but that doesn't count if it was the dream body which started the thing going. Perhaps it is that we do not have the faith, the conviction while conscious, and that therefore the motivity is not powerful enough, through conscious suggestion, to move anything. Does not what I have just said concerning my experience jibe with what is there said in a fair degree, being said in page 384 of the book The Coming Science? This is the book of the author, the editor. There is only one thing which bewilders me, the time element. Why does not that metronome start before I am again clearly conscious in the physical body? To be sure, it takes no time at all to interiorize the phantom while one is not conscious, but still, that would not account for the time element. If I were to dream of starting it, then awaken and hear it going, that could easily be accounted for, but it does not start until after I am awake. That metronome incident, no, it was not an auditory hallucination. I had to get up to shut the thing off. The second time I let it go just to see if anyone upstairs would hear it. My brother did, and after a time he came downstairs and shut it off. It ran 5 or 6 minutes the first time and about 20 minutes the second time. One could not call a reality like that a hallucination, could he? Do you think it would be all right to mention this incident as a possible proof that things can be moved in dreams, even though I cannot prove it to anyone? Of course, I could not prove that the dream actually did play a part, but if not, how in the world did the thing start immediately after I dreamt of starting it if I did not have something to do with it? I have been ordered to stay in bed for 4 weeks, but I probably can ride along, although not at a very fast rate. My back is getting pretty tired, so I'll have to lie down for a while, and we'll close for now. We'll send you another batch of manuscripts in a few days. The morning I had an accidental projection while lying on my stomach and in complete light. If that isn't running contrary to the laws of projection, nothing is. And this is what I discovered. While lying on the stomach, the sensations while moving through the air are reversed. When you move upward, you think you are moving downward, and vice versa. The only way to tell the true direction of movement is by sense of sight. I would have sworn that I was moving downward, but on looking, saw that I was moving upward. A few mornings ago, I awoke at about 6 o'clock and lay awake for about 20 minutes. Then I dozed off to sleep again and dreamt that I was standing on the same spot which I occupied in the metronome dreams, in the instances I told you about before. I dreamt that my mother was sitting in a rocking chair and she said to me, "Do you know you're dreaming?" I replied, "By gosh, I am, aren't I?" That ended the dream, and it seemed that I had no sooner said, "By gosh, I am," than I awoke in the physical body in bed. I was conscious, but unable to move. I could not utter a sound, could not move my eyelids. This condition prevailed for about 3 minutes, and all the time my entire body kept twitching, especially the limbs. Then I suddenly became normal. About 2 seconds later, a loud rap sounded, as if someone had struck the iron of the bed a blow with a heavy mallet. The noise was so loud that I ducked, as it rather frightened me. Remember, I was perfectly conscious for about 2 seconds before this rap sounded. No one was anywhere near, and this occurred in full light. These physical manifestations are certainly interesting, to me at least, as I never have experienced such things. But then neither have I ever tried. These things came about by themselves. You know, there is a belief that materializations cannot take place without a circle. Well, I once saw 3 spirits materialize and walk right round the room and talk. My mother was very ill and had been confined to bed for several weeks. One evening, we were alone in the house, she in bed under the influence of morphine, talking as one under its influence often does. 1 minute she would talk rather sensibly, and the next minute not. I sat in the next room reading, facing the door of her room. I had not been paying much attention to her talk, as I had become used to it. I was reading when suddenly I heard a clatter of voices. One of them I recognized as my grandmother's. I looked up. There were 3 fully materialized spirits standing and walking about the room where my mother was. At first I thought that she was out of bed. Then I saw that there were 3 of them. I immediately recognized my grandmother, but I did not know the other 2. For a moment I could not believe this was actual. Then my mother called out, "Sylvan, come here quick. Here are your grandmother, grandfather, and Louis." I had never seen the 2 last mentioned, but have known my grandmother before her death. My grandmother was a German and was talking in German. I heard her say something like this, "What fehlt der Jung?" I jumped up and went into the room, slowly fearing that they would dematerialize. My grandmother stood in the doorway facing me and said, "Solbun." She could not say Sylvan and always called me this when I was small. I advanced to the door and spoke. One of the figures seemed to drop down through the floor. Another disappeared, but my grandmother still stood there, and I could see by the expression on her face that she wanted me to stand back. Then she vanished, and I rushed through the door. My mother was quite rational and said, "Why didn't you come in sooner? All 3 of them were materialized." I assured her that I had seen the whole performance through the open door. There was a fair amount of light in the bedroom and also in the room where I was reading. I asked my mother, "What did she say?" It sounded like, "What fehlt der Jung?" My mother said something in German, which I cannot quote, but which sounds exactly like what I heard, and said it means, "What's the matter, girl?" My mother is half English and half German and can understand and talk German. Anyway, this is just what happened. Every time you see one of these division lines, it means that I have to stop and take a rest, for sitting up tires me very much. But I hope to be able to write for a longer time together soon. The past few days I had been very weak and thought that I would cash in last Monday. I suppose it will be some time before I have another batch ready to send, but will do so as soon as I possibly can. I hope you can read this, as it's difficult to write in bed. When I stop to think about it, it seems very hard for me to believe that conscious astral projection is not universally known. I can hardly conceive that such a real phenomenon is ever doubted, that it's not accepted just as a physical life is accepted. But then, perhaps I should not feel as I do if I had not experienced it so many times myself. When one is consciously projected, there is no question about it. One knows it. I know it, just as well as I know I'm sitting here writing this letter. But how can I prove this to anyone else? I might be told that I am dreaming when I'm physically conscious, and I could not prove that I am not. It is self-evident. I'm out of bed and at it again. I wish I could have felt better when I was writing the book, for I probably could have done a better job. As it is, every word was written with reluctance. I have never had a conscious out-of-body experience when I was not here on the earth plane, just as much as I am right now. I wouldn't know where to look for the higher planes. Curious indeed how some astral projectors can get into these higher planes when many spirits on the lower planes assert that they cannot do so. Most projectors who claim to be able to do this are so egotistical that they imagine that they will at once wake up after death in some higher plane. I know one near, always telling about her trips in the spirit world, but always telling something which a mere clairvoyant dream would account for. She is constantly saying that the secret of projection is a dangerous tool in the hands of the ignorant, etc., so that she will not be pressed for an explanation as to how she does it. Now this is just where I think she is doing the wrong thing. I believe that if a person knows how it's done, he should tell exactly how, so that others can experiment and try it for themselves. I would not have the cheek to tell others that I think is too dangerous for them to try, but it's not too dangerous for me to try, because I do not think that I am so much wiser than they are. I'm sending you the last batch of manuscripts today. Would it not be a good idea to ask readers to report their results? Perhaps some valuable material might be collected in this way. This request might be inserted somewhere in the book. The projection of the astral body, Chapter 1. Existence of the astral body, long known. There is a natural physical body and there is a spiritual body, so states St. Paul in his first epistle to Corinthians. Psychic research, too, has long ago established the belief that within every material being is a non-material double, a cryptic entity coinciding with minute exactitude with the physical mechanism in every center and cell. Records are numerous, coming from many trustworthy scientists, which substantiate the claim that this non-material being, the astral body as it is commonly termed by them, is capable of separating from its physical counterpart and of existing entirely outside its material abode, intangible to the beings surrounding it. This enigmatic occurrence will be spoken of as astral projection or astral exteriorization, both terms being synonymous. In occult writings, many have told of the strange phenomenon of astral projection, but with all the knowledge thus far accumulated, we may still consider ourselves merely in the kindergarten of the school of mystery. For exteriorization of the astral body is in fact the first step into that mysterious realm called death, which sooner or later all of us must enter. So, reader, if you are interested in this dark phenomenon, if you have stood over the casket and gazed upon the cold corpse, and in silent awe have wondered how that being who only shortly before was animate, possessed of intelligence, moving, thinking, and talking even as you, could now be but a lifeless clod, the same as you shudder to think you too will become, then you are interested in astral projection, for astral projection and death are not unlike. To the vast multitudes who have never met with this phenomenon, and even to those who have in some manner acquainted themselves with it, it must necessarily be placed in the category of theories. But to the conscious astral projector himself, exteriorization of the non-material counterpart of the physical is a great reality, as self-evident as the fact that he is consciously alive. At the outset, the reader should understand that the writer is well acquainted with the phenomenon, having indulged in hundreds of projections during a period of 12 years, projections both of a pleasant and a disagreeable nature, while completely conscious and partially conscious. The greater part of the material contained in this work is from his own experience. After so many years as an astral projector, and at the same time while conducting many experiments with the face, I have gleaned countless facts and made numerous reasonable deductions from those facts, some of which, so far as I can ascertain, have never been discovered or made known by other writers in the occult field. Realizing that the world is filled with skeptics who stand pat in their tracks, proclaiming themselves practical, who are not open to new possibilities to prove it, folks who cannot see that the road leading to the real is befogged with mystery and merges into the horizon of mystery at both ends. I wish to state that if you are one of this type, looking for proofs that can be measured and weighed through the medium of your limited mind and 5 senses, you will not find them in this book. The materialist, of course, will reject the very idea of astral projection as nonsense. Reason is his idol, the light that guides his convictions. He revels under what he terms the divine torch of reason. There is only one trouble with this divine torch: it doesn't shed much light on the mysteries of life. Life itself is beyond comprehension by the mind of man, to say nothing of its appealing to reason. Just which of the materialist's 5 senses it is that gives him an understanding of life, of creation, or of thought and mental processes, he does not make known, yet he must accept them. Indeed, everything is accepted without extensive reasoning. We may examine everything, examine anything, analyze till doomsday, yet there will always loom up the inexplicable on the other hand. There is no point in the occult teachings better established, longer held, or more thoroughly proven, says William Walker Atkinson, than that of the existence of the astral body. This teaching of the ancient occultists is being corroborated by the experiments and investigations of the psychic researchers of the present day. The astral body, belonging to every person, is an exact counterpart of the perfect physical body of the person. It is composed of fine ethereal matter and is usually encased in the physical body. In ordinary cases, the detachment of the astral body from its physical counterpart is accomplished only with great difficulty, but in the case of dreams, great mental stress, and under certain conditions of occult development, the astral body may become detached and sent on long journeys, traveling at a rate of speed only less than that of light waves. On these journeys, it's always connected with the physical body by a long, filmy connecting link. If this link were to become broken, the person would die instantly, but this is an almost unheard of occurrence in the ordinary planes of action. The astral body exists a long time after the death of the physical body, but it disintegrates in time. It sometimes hovers around the resting place of the physical corpse and is mistaken for the spirit of the deceased person, although really it's merely a shell or finer outer coating of the soul. The astral body of a dying person is often projected to the presence of friends and loved ones a few moments before the physical death, the phenomenon arising from the strong desire of the dying person to see and be seen. The astral body frequently travels from its physical counterpart in psychomantic phenomena and visits scenes far distant, there sensing what is occurring. It also leaves the body during what are known as psychomantic dreams, or under the influence of anesthetics, or in some of the deeper phases of hypnosis, when it visits strange scenes and places, and often holds mental conversation with other astral bodies or else with disembodied entities. The jumbled and distorted recollections of these dreams are occasioned by the brain not having received perfect impressions transmitted to it by reason of lack of training, development, etc., the result being like a blurred or distorted photographic plate. I have assumed that the reader has already convinced himself of the reality of the phenomenon, or is occultly interested enough to accept it. No discussion will be made of spiritism in general, which does not contribute to the problems of astral projection, for there are volumes too numerous to mention by far more able writers than myself. In this study, we are mostly concerned with certain eccentricities of the astral body which take place while we are physically alive, and although this astral body exists through and after death, as I have mentioned before, others have told of its survival, so our interest rests upon considerations of the astral body before the physical counterpart has been permanently severed from it. We call ourselves physically alive, but in reality the material part of us is as dead as a doornail. It is the energy behind the physical mechanism that is the real live thing. Nerves themselves are not alive. If they were, we have buried many a living body. It is the neuric energy which animates, and the astral body is the condenser of the nervous energy you are using right now. Why, you will say, then the astral body is in existence now? And it is. Many have been the authorities upon the subject of astral projection, and many are under the impression that the astral body is formed by mental process, which is not the case. If it were the case, where would the victim who is bumped off instantly get his astral body? If such were the case, no one would be possessed of an astral body after death except the fellow who was lucky enough to have heard of the creative mental process. Yes, you are using your astral body even now. It is turned down, we might say, to harmonize with the vibrations common to material substance. Now there are factors which hold it down, and there are factors which tune it up. The powers which can be exerted to disharmonize the attunement are the powers which will cause the astral to move out of the physical. The astral body coincides with the physical throughout. Both bodies being substance, it is obvious that both will be identical in shape, and the phantom is in appearance an exact duplicate of the physical body. Surviving what is termed death, the astral body is often seen by others present at death, the true likeness of the physical. After death, the phantom continues to hold this true form, but sooner or later changes to a much more finely composed spirit. The range of vibration to which our earthly existence is limited does not extend over all creation. Consequently, we are unaware of the vast realities all around us. When the astral phantom, whose eyes you are using even now in reading this, becomes tuned up, which it can be, those eyes will be able to see other things besides the familiar surroundings, and the astral body will be able to get out of the physical. The fact that the eyes after projection are capable of seeing earthly and other astral beings too shows that the range of vibration has increased. This may appear paradoxical to one who is accustomed to the idea that the conscious mind is a part of the physical mechanism. In fact, the material body has no mind at all, but clings over the astral, to speak symbolically, which is the real ego, through which the conscious mind really functions. It's erroneous to believe that the astral being has a super mentality. It has not. The conscious mind, as you know it, is the mind of the astral body. Your normal conscious mind, everything it contains, is the you. You, the individual, now and throughout eternity, learning as it goes. There is, however, the subconscious, that vast, unfathomable superintelligence, which is well nigh omnipotent and inherent in all. Yet we do not conceive this as the individual as we do the conscious. Most believers in the spirit are somehow under the impression that to awaken in the astral is to be enlightened by all the powers of the subconscious, which is not the case, for the subconscious sustains practically the same relation to the exteriorized phantom as it does to the interiorized physically alive being. Suppose, for example, that your physical body were to drop off, die, this very instant. You would be in the astral, still unchanged, not as a super-intelligent being, but retaining your identical mentality as before, no more nor less. And this is one great point to remember. The physical is but non-intelligent material, and is like a cloak to the astral phantom. It is logical to suppose that at birth the astral body, the ego, was brought into being by the omnipotent intelligence which is, was, and always will be, while the conscious mind of this body was in the form of a blank, ready to receive impressions, learn, and grow. It matters not at what stage of life we may die. Our total consciousness at the end of the earthly existence is the total we possess after physical expiration. My first conscious astral projection. Holding the fact firmly in mind that the astral member is the real live self and that the physical is but a sort of a shell, we will now turn our attention to what actually occurs when astral projection takes place. I shall describe the very first conscious projection I ever experienced. Realize, however, that all experiences are not alike, and that if by following the laws of the art, which will be summed up later, you succeed in projecting, what you meet with may not tally in all respects with what I have given, and that proficiency is acquired by practice. At the time I was a youth of 12, thinking little of life's more serious problems and caring less. Although others in the family had studied along occult lines to some extent, I knew practically nothing concerning the higher life. To be sure, I had heard that we live after death, much as we do now, but that was the sum total of my knowledge on the subject, and even that was not a matter of thought with me. Through reading some books on spiritism, my mother, mostly urged by curiosity and the desire to determine whether it was fact or fiction, decided to visit the camp of the Mississippi Valley Spiritualists Association at Clinton, Iowa. I accompanied her, as did my very small brother, and the occurrence which I shall now relate took place there. We retired at an early hour that evening, incidentally rooming in a house where lodged half a dozen widely known mediums. I dozed off to sleep about 10:30 o'clock in the same natural manner as I had always done before, and slept for several hours. At length I realized that I was slowly awakening, yet I could not seem to drift back into slumber nor further arouse. In this bewildering stupor I knew within me that I existed somewhere, somehow, in a powerless, silent, dark, and feelingless condition. Still I was conscious, a very unpleasant contemplation of being. I repeat again, I was aware that I existed, but where I could not seem to understand. My memory would not tell me. The stupefaction which one experiences when first arousing from the influence of an anesthetic is similar. I thought that I was awakening from natural sleep in a natural manner, yet I could not proceed. There was but one thought dominating my mind. Where was I? Where was I? Gradually, it seemed an eon of time, but in reality it was but a short interval. I became more conscious of the fact that I was lying somewhere. These few half-clear thoughts brought relative thoughts, and shortly I seemed to know that I was reclining upon a bed, but still bewildered as to my exact location. I tried to move, to determine my whereabouts, only to find that I was powerless, as if I adhered to that on which I rested. Adhered, that is the exact sensation. If conscious at the beginning of exteriorization, one feels fairly glued down, stuck fast in an immovable position. A peculiar fact about this phenomenon is that one can be conscious yet unable to move. This condition I have called astral catalepsy, since there is no word yet coined to define it. Astral catalepsy will be discussed later on in more detail. Suffice it to say here that astral catalepsy can be present either with or without the functioning of the senses, and with or without consciousness, for astral catalepsy is direct subconscious control. Eventually the feeling of adhesion relaxed, but was replaced by another sensation equally unpleasant, that of floating. Occurring at the same time, my entire rigid body, I thought it was my physical, but it was my astral, commenced vibrating at a great rate of speed in an up and down direction, and I could feel a tremendous pressure being exerted in the back of my head in the medulla oblongata region. This pressure was very impressive and came in regular spurts, the force of which seemed to pulsate my whole body. All this was to me like some queer nightmare in total darkness, for of course I knew not what was taking place. Amid this pandemonium of bizarre sensations, floating, vibratory, zigzagging, and head-pulling, I began to hear somewhat familiar and seemingly far distant sounds. The sense of hearing was beginning to function. I tried to move, but still could not, as if I were in the grip of some cryptic and super-powerful directing force. No sooner had the sense of hearing come into being than that of sight followed. When able to see, I was more than astonished. No words could possibly explain my wonderment. I was floating. I was floating in the very air, rigidly horizontal, a few feet above the bed. The room, my exact location, was now comprehended. Things seemed hazy at first, but were becoming clearer. I knew well where I was, yet could not account for my strange behavior. Slowly, still zigzagging, with a strong pressure in the back of my head, I was moving toward the ceiling, all the while horizontal and powerless. I believed naturally that this was my physical body as I had always known it, but that it had mysteriously begun to defy gravity. It was too unnatural for me to understand, yet too real to deny. For being conscious, being able to see, I could not question my sanity. Involuntarily, at about 6 feet above the bed, as if the movement had been conducted by an invisible force present in the very air, I was uprighted from the horizontal position to the perpendicular and placed standing upon the floor of the room. There I stood for what seemed to me about 2 minutes. Still powerless to move of my own accord and staring straight ahead. I was still astrally cataleptic. Then the controlling force relaxed. I felt free, noticing only the tension in the back of my head. I took a step when the pressure increased for an interval and threw my body out at an acute angle. I managed to turn around. There were 2 of me. I was beginning to believe myself insane. There was another me lying quietly upon the bed. It was difficult to convince myself that this was real, but consciousness would not allow me to doubt what I saw. My 2 identical bodies were joined by means of an elastic-like cable, one end of which was fastened to the medulla oblongata region of the astral counterpart, while the other end centered between the eyes of the physical counterpart. This cable extended across the space of probably 6 feet which separated us. All this time I was having difficulty in keeping my balance, swaying first to one side then to the other. Ignorant of the true significance of my condition, my first thought on seeing this spectacle was that I had died during sleep. I did not know at that time that death comes only with the severing of the elastic-like cable. I made my way, struggling under the magnetic pull of the cord, to where the consanguineous earthly beings lay asleep in another room, hoping to awaken them and let them know of this awful plight. I attempted to open the door, but found myself passing through it, another miracle to my already astonished mind. Going from one room to another, I tried fervently to arouse the sleeping occupants of the house. I clutched at them, called to them, tried to shake them, but my hands passed through them as though they were but vapors. I started to cry. I wanted them to see me, but they could not even feel my presence. All of my senses seemed normal, save that of touch. I could not make touchable contact with things as formerly. An automobile passed by the house. I could see it and hear it plainly. After a while the clock struck 2, and looking, I saw it registering that hour. I began to prowl about the place, filled with anxiety that morning would come and that then those sleepers would awaken and see me. As I recall it, I prowled about in different rooms for perhaps 15 minutes when I noticed a pronounced increase in the resistance of the cable. It was pulling with a stronger and stronger tug. I began to zigzag again under this force, and found presently that I was being pulled backward toward my physical body. Again I found myself powerless to move. Again I was in the grip of a tremendous unseen directing power. I was cataleptic and was resuming the horizontal position directly over the bed. It was the reverse procedure of that which I had experienced whilst rising from the bed. Slowly the phantom lowered, vibrating again as it did so. Then it dropped suddenly, coinciding with the physical counterpart once more. At this moment of coincidence, every muscle in the physical jerked, and a penetrating pain, as if I had been split open from head to foot, shot through me. I was physically alive again, filled with awe, as amazed, as fearful, and I had been conscious throughout the entire occurrence. Since the adventure I have just related took place, I have experienced hundreds of other projections, with countless deviations from the given sensations, but with the corporal movement always clinging to the same route as that which I have described. Although repetition naturally brings about greater perfection, this is probably one of the most unusual first projections on record, so far as consciousness is concerned, eclipsing in its clarity many of the best efforts of adept mediums. While it is my personal opinion that I naturally possess a hidden power to project the inner being from my body, I also credit the extraordinariness of this first conscious exteriorization to the fact that several remarkable mediums slept in rooms adjacent to the one which I occupied. It is a fact, as most students of the occult understand, that a line of force can be established between persons for the benefit of another person. I shall touch upon this point later inasmuch as it concerns this phenomenon. I have purposely omitted many details in drawing a picture of the first projection, which will be fully covered as we go more deeply into the study. A long story in itself could be told of astral plane life, earthly relativity, association of phantoms, etc. Yet no disclosure capable of being consigned to pen and ink could ever do justice to it all. So I shall refrain from delving into this department now, my purpose being to give a more analytic presentation of the phenomenon of astral exteriorization and how it is produced. About the first hot shot that the skeptic or even delvers into the supernormal will give the conscious projector is that he, the projector, did not leave his physical body at all, and that what he supposed happened was but a dream which was indelibly registered in his memory. There is only one answer to this ridiculous supposition. If a person does not know when he is conscious, then indeed he should be submitted to a sanity test. The doubter will say, now you could have been dreaming all this. In your dream, you would not know you were not fully conscious. This is reverse reasoning. In a dream, a man may not know that he is unconscious. But when he is conscious, he does know positively that he is not dreaming. Why? Simply because we have a distinct understanding of both present and past, when conscious. So do not form the idea that conscious astral projection is but a dream reminiscence. Now let us go on. From what has gone before, we now have a fair mental picture of an astral body projection, wherein consciousness participated from the very commencement to the very finish of the process. It is, however, not always that such is the case, this being the exceptional and not the commonly met with occurrence. Consciousness, in fact, may interpose at any time or at any place or in any position during the process. It may be interspersed with unconsciousness, or it may never enter into the act at all. As a rule, when consciousness does intervene, it makes its debut after the body has already separated and is walking about totally unaware of the fact up to the time of awakening. Incidentally, this being the most common time and place for the intervention of consciousness, it's also the most desirable, for thus is the preliminary and agreeable stages spoken of in the foregoing account are eliminated from the subject's consciousness. The elementary stages, the subconsciously controlled catalepsy, zigzagging and floating, are not pleasant to experience consciously, although one soon becomes hardened to them. Nevertheless, these preliminary activities always do take place, providing, of course, that the exteriorization occurs with the physical entranced in a lying or horizontal position when the subject is unconscious. Chapter 2. Astral catalepsy. Mention was made of astral catalepsy, and as this condition is the cause of many different phenomena attributed to other sources, it will be well to understand it more thoroughly. We have all heard of catalepsy. Webster defines it as a sudden suspension of sensation and volition with muscular rigidity. That is what it is when the astral body is in coincidence with the physical. Yet, catalepsy is subconscious control of the astral body and can exist apart from the physical organism, as was shown in the above quoted experience. Under catalepsy, the astral body is set, unyielding to form, rigid, one might say, not unlike the physical body during cataleptic rigidity. When a person is physically cataleptic, he is in that condition because he is astrally cataleptic. Most of us have seen demonstrations in hypnotism where a subject under cataleptic rigidity is suspended horizontally by his heels and head, while huge boulders are placed upon the center of his body and smashed into bits with a sledgehammer. It is catalepsy of the astral body which produces physical catalepsy. With the phantom once exteriorized and powerless under catalepsy, the subconscious can maneuver it as it pleases. This is an example of the wisdom of the superintelligence. All of us know how difficult it is to lift a limpid living body to the upright position, and how easy it is if the body be resistless and stiff. The subconscious, it seems, makes use of this law. Even though the astral body be cataleptically controlled, the conscious mind can function or partially function, but usually it does not function until the spell is removed. Astral catalepsy reigns from the beginning of exteriorization until it progresses to that point where the phantom is in the vertical or standing position. It is not unusual for the phantom to stand there for some time before being liberated. Some projectors get only to this point and never become free, interiorizing again all the time in a cataleptic condition. When such is the case, the body will always be unstable, swaying to and fro, from side to side, forward and backward. This is really an incompleted projection. A completed projection could not be considered so unless the phantom were liberated from catalepsy. In the interiorization movement of a complete projection, catalepsy comes into being again at the time when the body is ready to transit from the vertical to the horizontal. Types of projections. There are three kinds of projection which may be classified as conscious, partially conscious, unconscious. Under the latter classification, unconscious, there are two distinct forms of the phenomenon. First, emotive, second, somnambulistic. Emotive unconscious astral projection is simply unconscious astral catalepsy in the perpendicular or standing position. It's a frequent happening for the projector to stand in this manner, as I have shown in the preceding paragraphs. Just as under the unconscious classification there are two kinds of phenomena, emotive and motive somnambulistic, there are likewise emotive and motive types of conscious projection. The only difference between the unconscious motive and emotive types and the conscious motive and emotive types is that in the latter the subject is awake. Obviously, the emotive type always precedes and may develop into the motive. Astral somnambulism. Just as there is somnambulism, commonly called sleepwalking, of the physical being, there are also persons who, while asleep, walk about in the astral body. This I have termed astral somnambulism. It's a state of unconscious projection more advanced than the unconscious emotive state. It is the state where the phantom is liberated from catalepsy but remains unconscious, and is far more common than is generally supposed. During sleep, many mediums travel in the astral body but never become conscious while doing so. Consequently, they never realize that fact. I stated formerly that when consciousness does intervene, it comes in most cases while the subject is either standing cataleptic or is astrally somnambulating. It has been my most common experience to gain consciousness and find myself astrally somnambulating. In astral somnambulism, just as in physical somnambulism, the subconscious mind controls the meandering body. Conscious interruptions during astral somnambulism. At scattered intervals throughout astral somnambulism, the dormant conscious mind may become active for an infinitesimally short time, or partially conscious for a longer or shorter time. When the intermittent flashes of awareness occur, they register muddled and haphazard scenes, sounds, etc., and the next day the subject may recall a jumble of phantasmal recollections. There are innumerable different variations of interrupted somnambulism. A perfect or imperfect working of the senses, intermingled with countless degrees of consciousness, will naturally bring about a registration upon the memory in exact accordance with the complications. It is obvious that the nearer normal is the functioning of the senses, and the nearer normal the state of consciousness, the nearer true will be the recollections. Perhaps you have visited an entirely unfamiliar place, and upon viewing it have faint or conglomerated recollections of having been in that very spot before, yet you knew you had not been there. It is possible that you could have been there in a state of interrupted astral somnambulism. The future contemplating subconscious mind sometimes projects the astral body to places which the subject later visits in the physical. Far more often, however, it's clairvoyant vision and not projection that does this. Conscious interruptions during astral projection are by no means confined to the somnambulating state, for they can take place while in the unconscious emotive stage too. It is easily seen that if the body be somnambulating while the flashes of consciousness are participating, it will be passing through a changing environment, which will tend to bemuddle the registration upon the memory, while if the body be in the emotive condition, the registration will be more single and specific. Not all that we call dreams are caused by conscious interruptions, although some of them are. I will point out later the relation of astral projection to dreams. Distant point projection. Another distinct form of the phenomenon being discussed is distant point projection. The astral body separates from its physical counterpart and travels to some faraway place during the state of unconsciousness, although sometimes becoming conscious for an interval at that place. Usually the medium, while awake, instructs his subconscious to send him to the remote place where he wishes to go, so that he may witness the scenes and events which are happening there. Trance intervenes. On awakening again, he is aware of having been at the desired place, but scarcely ever has any recollection of having made the trip. In such a case, the actual distance covered is not recalled, because the flight is seemingly made with the speed of light and is always unconscious. Obviously, the actual distance and the creations which it contains are not consciously recorded in the projector's consciousness. There are records of distant point projectors who have been seen in the astral body, far removed from the physical by others mediumistically inclined. No less an authority than William T. Stead has told of a lady of his personal acquaintance who was especially gifted with the ability to project afar and there materialize. She became a source of great worry and distress to her friends, for she would pay them unexpected visits, materialize, and frighten them. Naturally, they supposed that she must have died and that this was her ghost. The occurrences, however, became so frequent that her friends finally became familiar with the phenomenon and viewed it with great interest and wonder. Many so-called distant point projections are probably not projections at all, as a matter of fact, but are subconscious creations of the medium's own, as the subconscious alone can visit a distant point seen, not unlike that which the conscious astral body would see it if there. Of distant point vision, one writer has said, "The view of a distant scene obtained in this way is in many ways not unlike that seen through a telescope. Human figures usually appear very small, like those upon a distant stage, but in spite of their diminutive size, they are clear, as though they were close by. Sometimes it's possible by this means to hear what is said as well as to see what is done. But as in the majority of cases this does not happen, we must consider it rather as the manifestation of an additional power than as a necessary corollary of the faculty of sight. It will be observed that in cases of this kind, the clairvoyant does not actually leave his physical body at all. He simply manufactures for himself and uses a kind of psychic telescope. Consequently, he has the use of his physical powers while he is examining the distant scene. For example, his voice usually describes what he sees, even while he is in the act of making the observation. The Phantom's 3 moving speeds. There are 3 different velocities at which the phantom travels. First, the natural and normal speed, which is in use when the subject is conscious and free to move about in his immediate environment or while he is in a state of astral somnambulism. He merely walks. Second, the intermediate speed, in which the subject moves along without effort, faster than the normal speed, but not fast enough to cause loss of perception. When this takes place, one does not appear to be moving, but everything seems to be coming toward him, through him, passing him, just as the fields and fences seem to speed backward when one rides in a fast train. The phantom does not seem to pass through the door seems to pass through the phantom. Streaks of light, scintillations are thrown off by the astral body and extend backward about 2 feet as it moves along at this intermediate speed. These scintillations appear phosphorescent, the color of the astral body, and trail behind it in the same manner that scintillations trail behind a shooting star. This intermediate speed enables the subject to cover considerable distances rapidly without loss of consciousness. Third is the supernormal traveling velocity, a speed beyond comprehension. It always occurs when the subject is unconscious and is in play when the phantom is moving back and forth over great distances. It would be utterly impossible to move across a vast area at such speed and realize the distance, for the conscious mind is too slow in its thinking, and therefore it could formulate one single thought, and before it could formulate one single thought, the objective would have already been reached. What I have just said concerning the 3 speeds at which the projected astral body moves is true also of permanently separated astral beings, the dead. It has been the contention of some that every transit of the projected astral body always takes place with super speed. This is true only when the phantom is moving toward a very distant place. On other occasions, the intermediate traveling speed may be used, and still at other times the free phantom behaves in a manner befitting its physically alive self, with all its own peculiarities of stride, swing, and carriage, morbidity, and incentive to projection. The supposition should not be made that astral projection occurs only during natural sleep. It may take place when the subject is in practically any state of consciousness. In times of sickness, especially that sort of sickness which is stead or sedative, astral projection can and often does take place. It's a fact that the more weakened, languid, and enervated the physical becomes, the more easy the astral member detaches itself from it. For at such times, less material resistance is brought to bear against the inner workings which prompt the separation. Undoubtedly, at the time of death, many people are already erect in the astral body before the final breath of the physical body is taken, although they may not be conscious of the fact. It is my firm belief that physical debility is an incentive to most kinds of mediumship, for the less material coordination a person has, the less material will be the influences to overcome by the subconscious resources. This morbidity factor is also true of astral projection. In making the statement, I am aware that it's contrary to the ideas of many prominent authorities. Popular opinion seems to have it that perfect material coordination, health, is an essential requisite to the production of the phenomenon of astral projection, but I hope to discredit this belief by quoting experiences and pointing out specific reasons for believing that the contrary is true. If I do disagree with others as to what produces, assists, and influences projection of the astral body, I do so because of my own experience with this phase. So, I can only say that if my disagreeing contemporaries are right in their claims, then I am an exception. I shall, however, return to this morbidity question later. Exteriorization may be induced by hypnotism and mesmerism. It is a significant fact that Andrew Jackson Davis, the seer of Poughkeepsie and one of the world's greatest, had astral projection induced at an early age by a mesmerist, William Livingston. Davis' first out-of-body experience was that of moving through the air in a spiral direction. Instantaneous astral exteriorization. A violent blow, especially upon the head, or an extreme shock, wherein unconsciousness ensues as a consequence, is another common cause of instantaneous astral projection. If you wish to try a simple formula for instantaneous astral projection, allow some friend, or preferably some enemy, to strike you over the head with a baseball bat, a percussive blow. This is about the most simple method, but since you might not be conscious while exteriorized, it might perhaps be best to follow some of the formula which will be given later. To speak seriously, however, it is true that a vigorous blow or jolt will often cause a speedy and ephemeral sensation, whether the victim be aware of it or not. An ephemeral conscious projection experience. A neighbor, a man of 70 whose present home is within sight of where I write this account, related an event to me which was purely a case of ephemeral and instantaneous astral projection of the conscious type. He had hitched his team one wintry day and gone into the country after a load of firewood. On his return, he was sitting atop the loaded sleigh, and light snow was falling. Without warning, a hunter who happened to be near the road discharged his gun at a rabbit. The horses jumped, jerking the sleigh and throwing the driver to the ground head first. He said when he told me of the accident that no sooner had he landed upon the ground then he was conscious of standing up and seeing another himself lying motionless near the road, face down in the snow. He saw the snow falling all about, saw the steam rising from the horses, saw the hunter running toward him. All this was very exact, but his great bemuddlement was that there were two of him, for he believed at the time that he was observing all that occurred from another physical body. As the hunter came near, things seemed to grow dim. The next conscious impression he had was of finding himself upon the ground with the hunter trying to revive him. What he had seen from his astral body was so real that he could not believe that there were not two physical bodies, and he even went so far as to look for tracks in the snow in the place where he knew he had been standing. Instantaneous projection is not uncommon. Such a manifestation as this not only shows how unchanged the individual is when apart from his physical body in everything but substance and composition, but it also demonstrates that the astral body is a component part, the very self of earthly existence, that it is the seat of the conscious mind and is not created by the will of the individual. Many people have undergone more or less similar experiences, but being ignorant of just what took place, have discarded it as some unexplainable or peculiar caper of the physical self. The duration of such an instantaneous projection depends upon the severity of the concussion causing it. If the blow or shock be violent, a longer interval of unconsciousness results than if it's less vigorous. It may easily be seen that the more prolonged the unconsciousness, the longer lived could be the exteriorization. Ephemeral coma could only allow ephemeral projection, and many times the duration of the exteriorization is but a fraction of a second. In truth, exteriorization and interiorization of the astral body can take place with such speed that the subject does not even realize that he was out of his physical body at all, having only felt dazed for an instant, and perhaps during that instant he believed that he had advanced about a foot beyond the spot where he was actually standing. Probably everyone has at some time in his life encountered a jolt that made him see stars, as the saying goes. The glow seen is an aura, and is visible for an instant as the two bodies discoincide. This same glow in greater expanse can be seen for a longer time when the projection is conscious, that is, at the beginning of a prolonged separation. The astral phantom is so much our very self that we do not realize how bound up in it we are. We do not seem to comprehend that we are using it this very moment. It's our life, this astral body, and when it permanently severes from the physical body, that physical is of no account. I wish I could convince you, reader, that this phantomous body is not a new entity which you will acquire in the future. It is the you of the present, your consciousness, your animation. Without the astral body, your physical anatomy would be but a crude mass of insensible material lying inert in the power of gravity. This phantom becomes accustomed to the habits it has formed by being coincident with or merged into the physical and made to conform to the laws applying to the physical. When something unusual or unnatural occurs to upset the harmony of the physical, a shock, a jolt, a broken habit, an intense unappeased desire, sickness, in fact anything which would cause a lack of perfect material coordination, there is always a jar to the astral. Collision may cause astral exteriorization. Concussion, to the extent of injury, is not the only way in which an instantaneous separation is often produced, for even an unexpected shake or jar of the physical will sometimes throw the phantom out of coincidence. Many are they who marvel at the thought that astral separation can be accomplished, yet I dare say almost everyone has already had this very thing occur to himself in some mild form, whether he knows it or not. And the extensive form of projection is but a continuance of the lesser. The following are two axioms appropriate to the simple type of astral detachment. First, a sudden force unexpectedly exerted against the body while it's moving in a given direction will not instantly interrupt the astral, and the latter will continue for an instant to move in the given direction, bringing itself momentarily out of coincidence. Second, a material body moving in a given direction, if suddenly and unexpectedly colliding with the inert body, will cause the physical member to move slightly out of coincidence in the given direction. The astral an instant later moves ahead into the physical. It must be remembered that this is but a short-lived and short-distance separation and takes place with lightning speed, almost too swift for the subject experiencing it to become unconscious, although he does feel a spurt of bewilderment as it occurs. Again, at such a time, one may feel as if he were about to rise into the air, or may feel a breathtaking sensation in the pit of the stomach. In either case, the collision must be unexpected, sudden, and forceful enough to interrupt the normal momentum of the moving mass. When the automobile stops quickly, throwing the occupants vigorously and unexpectedly forward, it is the ephemeral disharmony of the two bodies, astral and physical, which causes the breathtaking sensation. This may seem too commonplace to be true. If so, it is because our astral self is so much a part of us that we do not recognize the fact. We do not know ourselves. Projection caused by misstep. Here is an example of how an unexpected jar will throw the phantom out of coincidence. One night, a few years ago, I was coming down the stairs of my home. I had been sleeping and was still quite drowsy. There were 15 steps, and I had trodden up and down them hundreds of times, having lived in the house all my life. Just why, I do not know, but as I reached the bottom step, I tried to take one step more. Many of us have done this, and the impetus jarred me vigorously. A breathtaking sensation shot through the pit of my stomach, and even before the physical dropped to the floor, I found myself projected from it in a perfectly conscious state. And I don't mean that I thought I was conscious, I mean that I was conscious. I both saw the physical mechanism fall to the floor and also felt it fall while standing several feet from it. Let me analyze this, and we see that what actually happened, for by doing so we shall discover the fundamental law of astral projection. The fundamental law of astral projection. It must be understood that it's not the conscious mind which causes projection, but it's the subconscious will. We can walk by conscious effort, but we usually walk unconsciously under subconscious will. It is when the body is under subconscious motivation and an unexpected barrier intercedes the physical that the astral body keeps on moving in the given direction for a moment. If propulsion were conscious, this would not happen. In descending the stairs, had I been stepping consciously, this misstep would have been avoided. But the descent was unconscious, under the control of the subconscious will, and when the barrier floor interrupted the physical, the subconscious will was still under the inclination to descend, and actually moved the astral body out of coincidence. This same principle applies to separation brought about by a moving force colliding with an inert body. The inert body stands under a subconscious will. When the colliding force meets the physical, the subconscious will is under the inclination to remain in its given position until the conscious moves it. Thus, the phantom stands while the material is thrown out of coincidence. By analyzing the cause of instantaneous or insignificant separation, the following conclusions become self-evident. First, the body, coinciding bodies, can move unconsciously. Second, the body can move unconsciously when the conscious mind is functioning. Third, the body can move unconsciously when the conscious mind is not functioning, somnambulism. Fourth, when the body moves unconsciously, it is the subconscious will which moves it. Which brings us to the bedrock rule of astral projection. If the subconscious will becomes possessed of the idea to move the body, coinciding bodies, and the physical counterpart is incapacitated, the subconscious will move the astral body independent of the physical. Intentional and unintentional projection both result from the same causes. Since this is the fundamental law of projection, the question arises: how can the subconscious will be voluntarily incited to motivate while the physical is incapacitated or extremely passive? This is not an easy thing to do, you will see. And it's not an effect which can be brought about by a mere thought or half-hearted trial, although there are positive certain methods which can accomplish this. If we locate the causes which promote an intentional projection of the astral body and put these causes to work intentionally for the purpose of projection, then is there any reason why it cannot be brought about at will? All my early exteriorizations were accidental, unintentional. At first I believed that somehow I possessed some unnatural power which others lacked. But by making a lengthy study of the manifestations as they occurred and noting with care all the peculiarities encountered, eventually I was able to determine the causes which brought about the seeming miracle. Putting these causes into being with astral projection in mind, I succeeded in producing the phenomena at will, long before I ever read one word on the subject from the books of others. At present, I shall not delve deeply into these causes, but will discuss them later on, as I wish first to give some more general information concerning the subject. It will not be out of place, however, to state here that suppressed desire is by far the greatest single factor inciting unintentional projection. We can see how determined the subconscious will becomes once it's stimulated into activity. When you start walking, you would walk and walk and walk, were it not your conscious mind stopping you. And when you are standing, you would stand and stand and stand, did not your conscious mind start you moving. Now, how does suppressed desire possess the subconscious will to motivate the body? While conscious, you desire something. You do not appease that desire. You would appease it, but there is some obstacle in your way. So you go on desiring, all the while tensing the subconscious will. The stress grows so great that you are at war with yourself. You can feel the subconscious trying to accomplish that which you want. it would do so instantly, could it but get the best of your conscious mind. At this point, the subconscious will is all set to move the minute you try to hinder it no more. So while you sleep, the conscious mind can no longer tell the subconscious will no, and the subconscious will tries to project the body to the spot desired. Now, if the sleeping subject were physically incapacitated, the astral body would be projected. Meaning of physical incapacity. What do I mean physically incapacitated? Simply that the physical body is not in an active enough condition to respond the instant the subconscious will begins to move. As a rule, during sleep, the body is not in the same active condition which it is while awake. The heart is beating more slowly and the whole mechanism is below the level which it attains when normally awake. If the subject is morbid, the physical mechanism will not respond at once, which points more convincingly to the contention made that the weaker the subject, the more easily can the separation take place, providing the sickness be of a sedative nature. In the Psychology of Dreams, Walsh says, once sleep has actually begun, certain changes take place in the physical structure. The heart and respiratory rates become slower, less forcible. There is a fall in blood pressure, a warmth of the skin, an increased production of sweat. The stomach, intestines, kidneys, liver, and other organs are active, though at a lessened pace, since the amount of work required by the physical structures is much less than when awake. These parts are unable to rest, since repair exceeds waste. The various structures are sufficiently recuperated after a due amount of sleep. So by physically incapacitated, I mean a condition of unusual passivity, whether the subject be bedbound through illness or soundly sleeping, so that he will not become instantly active when the subconscious will becomes possessed to move the body. Consider the somnambulist. While he sleeps, the subconscious will becomes possessed to move the body, usually through suppressed desire. The sleeper rises from his bed and walks about in coincidence because his physical body is not inactive enough, not incapacitated to be behind time, when the subconscious will started the movement, whereas if he had been unusually passive, the astral body would have moved out of the physical, and he would have been in a state of astral somnambulism. Where and what is the conscious mind? What is the composition of the conscious mind? Where does it exist? Where is the conscious mind when it is not conscious? These are the questions which cannot be answered by the most sagacious of occult philosophers, and they no doubt always remain but material for speculation. We know not even the bounds, the nature, or the locality of the conscious mind. Still we know we are using the mind and that it apparently becomes unconscious. Yet where is it during unconsciousness? That is the great question. It seems almost as ridiculous to believe that the conscious mind can instantly evaporate into nothing as coma intervenes, as to believe that it's in existence during the interval of coma without our being aware of the fact. Now, if it were possible for the conscious mind to become nothing during the interval of coma, how could it recreate itself at the end of that interval with duplicate perfection from nothing? And on the other hand, if it be still in existence throughout the oblivious period, how can we account for the fact that we are not conscious at the place where consciousness exists? And where does consciousness exist? The more one probes into this riddle, the more probing will become necessary. To dwell upon it for a moment should convince even the most hopeless egotist that he does not know himself very well after all, that the mind is self-evident, but what becomes of it during coma remains unfathomable. Some contend that it's the senses and not the conscious mind which makes the exit, that without sense functioning there be no consciousness. But can the nature of the senses be defined any more than the conscious mind can be defined? What are the senses? How do they work? What makes sensibility? Where is sensibility during unconsciousness? Attempting to solve one mystery by substituting another only results in having more mysteries to solve. Others are of the opinion that when karma intervenes, the unconscious mind is exteriorized in the astral body. Therefore, one is unconscious. But how is it that the subject is not always aware of being exteriorized in the astral body at every intervention of oblivion, if this were true? How is it that we ever sleep? Where is the somnambulist's conscious mind? There can be but one reply: we do not know. The best that can be done is to compare the conscious mind while sleeping is reigning to a prisoner locked fast in a vault, unable to get out until the door is opened. If we could but determine what opens and closes the door of consciousness, then we could also determine why some astral projections result in consciousness and some do not. And further, we might discover a means by which the unconsciously projected phantom could always be made conscious instead of the present hit and miss experiences. The hypnagogic state, neurosis and sleep. When consciousness is present from the very beginning of an exteriorization, the etheric body egression begins in the hypnagogic state, which is the borderland between the conscious and the unconscious. Of the hypnagogic state, Walsh says, before going to sleep, we must pass through an unnoticed stage of half waking, half sleeping, termed the hypnagogic state. We must pass through a similar stage before we awaken. Usually, the hypnagogic state lasts but a few seconds, but it may be prolonged for as much as 15 minutes. It is apt to be longer when passing from the sleeping to the waking state than the reverse. As sleep is coming on, the sensation of falling may be experienced. This is occasioned by the general relaxation of the muscular system which occurs at this time. Should a person be much disturbed while in the hypnagogic state, the normal transition from waking to sleeping or the reverse may be markedly disordered. Consciousness may fully awaken, but the motor centers may awaken more slowly. This causes a temporal paralysis of the limbs, speech, and consequently an inability to move or walk. This form of paralysis, called noctual paralysis by some writers, the present writer contends that it's astral catalepsy, may occur after a natural awakening. As a rule, the paralysis lasts but a short time. Should it be prolonged, it excites much mental disquiet. Fatigue, nervousness, general ill health may provoke it. This only strengthens my belief that lack of material coordination is a favorable factor in projection. The etheric body is in catalepsy, inclined to move slightly out of the physical. Why does fatigue, nervousness, general ill health provoke the so-called paralysis? Because there is deficiency of neuric energy centered in the bodies. In fact, that is exactly what nervousness is: inability to hold the energy within the bounds of the physical. Energy is cosmic, omnipresent. It can flow into and out of the etheric counterpart, which is a veritable condenser of that energy. Now I have found that when the etheric body moves slightly out of coincidence, it becomes more of a magnet to the universal energy than when in coincidence. Thus, in the person of ill health, the paralysis experienced is but astral catalepsy, which is always the first state of exteriorization, caused by the subconscious being under the inclination to discoincide the bodies so that the etheric condenser may charge more freely. This occurrence takes place with millions of people every night, yet it's only when consciousness is still in play that they ever experience the paralysis or catalepsy. What is thought to be an aura resting above sleepers and seen by others is in reality the etheric body, out of coincidence a few inches. As a rule, in normal persons, consciousness is lost before the phenomenon begins. It's not difficult to understand that if consciousness is desired throughout a complete projection, the hypnagogic state is the ideal place for the egression to begin. Catalepsy with consciousness is more apt to occur in passing from sleeping to waking than the reverse. Trial will prove convincingly that if consciousness begins to function a little too strongly after the subconscious has effected a slight separation on entering sleep, the phantom is more apt to coincide again that it would be in a similar condition when waking from sleep. In other words, most projections will be more successful consciously if they begin in the hypnagogic state when coming out of sleep. When one awakens and finds himself powerless in astral catalepsy, called nocturnal paralysis, the very first thing he usually does is to become alarmed. He wishes to become physically active again and struggles within himself to be free. This is nothing short of a conscious suggestion to the subconscious will, and that will soon respond. If this discomposure could be eliminated and the subject would keep emotionally calm, the suggestion of becoming physically active would not be given to the subconscious control. Then, if the subject would think of rising up toward the ceiling and suggest that he float in the very air above him, the subconscious will would continue the exteriorizing process and a completely conscious and extensive projection would result. At such a time, the physical body is greatly incapacitated. The subconscious will already has the astral entity in its power. It is merely a matter of what suggestion is given to that will, which determines whether the phantom will continue to move out or will move back into coincidence again. It is exactly the same as walking. Once you're in motion, the subconscious will is in control, but the moment you give a conscious suggestion that you will stop, you stop. When you're consciously in astral catalepsy, if you then suggest that you wish to become physically active again, this is what will result. Perhaps you will reply to this as a friend of mine did by saying, "I'd like to see the fellow who wouldn't get excited on awaking and finding himself paralyzed." Yet I have done this, and I wager that anyone could bring about an extensive conscious projection if he keeps emotionally calm and gives the right suggestions when he does awaken and finds himself cataleptic. He couldn't help but do it. It's the very law. It's the same law we use every day of our lives when we walk about, directing the power that does the walking by conscious suggestion. To be sure, it is no easy matter for one to prevent himself from becoming emotional at the supernormal, especially when he himself is in the grip of it. But like all things supernormal, conscious projection soon loses its awe as one becomes more accustomed to it. Sensation and emotion at different stages of exteriorization. The place to which the phantom has progressed when consciousness comes, if it does, will naturally determine the first conception or sensation the subject will experience. At different degrees of separation, different sensations are produced. If consciousness makes its first meager appearance in the hypnagogic state, and the subconscious will is under projection inclination, the very first conception is that one exists somewhere. If slight awareness comes a second or two later, glued down, or catalepsy will be the first impression. if still an instant later floating, next trembling, zigzagging, etc. It's the action or place of progression of the phantom which determines what the first conscious thought will be. And this very first thought is of vital importance. It's then that one must remain calm and suggest uprising. Most conscious projections are ruined at the outset merely because the action of the phantom brings about an unpleasant sensation which in turn causes emotion. The following rule may well be applied to this phenomenon. Emotions of unpleasantness, alarm, fear, etc. are veritable suggestions to the subconscious will that the subject wishes to be normal or physically correct. Thus, the first thought will influence the immediately succeeding or relative thoughts, and if the activity is of a nature to cause emotion, the desire to become physically normal will at once follow and be a suggestion to the subconscious will to that effect. Conscious projection is more liable to take place just as the first conscious thought makes its appearance, before the phantom moves into the air, or after it's extensively projected and is upright, either emotive or somnambulating. The stages between are more promotive of unpleasant emotion. When one becomes trained and has practiced the face, the instant he has his first conscious thought, he will instinctively associate it with rising into the air instead of becoming uneasy, and will use every conscious effort to keep himself calm throughout what is about to happen. It is astonishing how really easy this is to do after it has been accomplished once. It's like a hesitating man about to take an airplane ride. Should he suddenly awake and find himself in the takeoff, he would immediately say, "Let go." This going to feel funny, but here goes. It may seem paradoxical that the action of the phantom will affect the emotions, and that the emotions will affect the action of the phantom. However, such is the case. It also may seem contrary to received opinion that nervousness is a factor favorable to detachment, and that the emotions must be calm. Still, this too is true. However, were it not for such a natural conditions involved in the production of projection, everyone would be doing it. Conscious astral projection never will be accomplished by anyone who cannot control his emotions. Chapter 3. Route the phantom travels in projection. I believe that this is the first time that any writer has ever definitely declared that the subconscious will ejects the phantom in a specific route, and that the position of the physical body at the time of ejection invariably governs the direction in which the double will move out of it. When the body is in a lying down position or horizontally at rest, the astral advances from the body in an upward direction, rigid, remaining strictly parallel to the material body. As a rule, all parts of the two bodies separate simultaneously. The etheric member shakes throughout its entire length, vibrates, more properly describes it, not from side to side, but upward and downward. Usually the progress upward in this manner is slow, the astral body advancing only an inch or so at a time, and many times falling back again. After approximately 1 foot of separation, it begins to zigzag, much like a snagged stick zigzags back and forth in the current of a stream. To become conscious at this spot will almost always excite the emotions and interiorize the phantom until one becomes accustomed to it. In this manner, the astral body eventually reaches a height of anywhere from 3 feet to 6 feet above the shell. At this point, the uprighting force begins to operate. The lower half, feet, begins to draw downward, while the upper half, the head, moves upward, which brings the phantom to the vertical or standing position. It's as if there were a pivot through the center of the body. There are times when the subconscious control does not upright the phantom directly under the shell, but after raising it to a height of about 5 feet, will begin to force it along in the air, still horizontal, for some distance, and then bring it down to the vertical. The trembling ceases as the uprighting begins, and the zigzagging becomes more of a side-to-side swaying. If the sense of sight be functioning, a variegated aura can be seen from the very beginning. This always is the route the phantom takes when exteriorization takes place while the body is in the horizontal position. The entire process may occur quickly or it may be prolonged. If exteriorization takes place when the physical body is in upright position, it may readily be seen that the horizontal activity is automatically eliminated, for then the etheric member moves right out from the material body already in a standing position. Astral exteriorization is not unlike another phenomenon, what has been termed the passing at the time of death. Insofar as the behavior of the phantom is concerned, the passing simply denotes the transition of the finer body from its coinciding position with the physical. While the astral body movements are alike in death and in exteriorization, there is one element present in the latter phenomenon which is absent in death, a vital line of force connecting the physical body with its astral counterpart. This line of force is called astral cord or astral cable, and in its presence lies the difference between deathly projection and projection which is not unto death. In death, as in astral projection, the phantom may not become conscious for some time. Some are said to become so quickly. Some exist for a while in the dream state. Others, it is claimed, remain unconscious for a long period of time. And some never even taste death, as Christ said, never even slumber. Picture someone, perhaps a soldier, walking straight ahead, consciously bent upon reaching a certain place. If, as he hastens along, something should instantly rend him asunder, say a flying missile, killing him instantly, the astral body would keep right on walking, ignorant of the fact for the moment that he was physically dead. This is given merely to show the relation which corporal position sustains to the astral body during their separation. Some symptoms of astral exteriorization. Perhaps you can now recall having experienced one or more of the elementary stages of astral projection: the adhered or glued down sensation, the sensation of floating, of whirling, of zigzagging, of uprising, jumps in the hypnagogic state, breathtaking sensation at a pit of stomach, a feeling as if one's consciousness were getting out of one's head. These same things may have happened to you many times when you were unaware of them. When you are conscious of them, the doctor will pass it off as nerves. It is easy to tell a patient that nerves cause such peculiar happenings, but telling him how nerves cause these happenings is a horse of another color. Nerves cause such peculiarities because the astral is not bound tightly in the physical. What is dizziness? It's a condition of looseness of the astral body. What loosens the astral body? Many things. A blow on the head, abnormal functioning of vital organs, a score of causes. Regardless of the case, dizziness indicates that the astral body is not bound tightly to the physical. When dizzy, we stagger because the astral body is loose and half inclined to withdraw from the physical. Whirling will cause dizziness since it loosens the astral body, and in this connection it is interesting to note that the fakirs often resort to whirling to accomplish astral exteriorization. An experience which is not altogether rare is that of waking at night for an instant and seeing a duplicate of oneself hovering about a foot above one. It lies in a horizontal position and is trembling, as if resting on the air. It's gauzy colored. A moment later we awake with a jump. In such a case, the etheric, I call the astral etheric not because I believe it is composed of ether, but because others do not believe this, have given it that name, was about 1 foot out of coincidence. But you will say, I saw this from my physical body. And you did, but the conscious mind was not in the physical body. I will attempt to explain later how the senses can cut capers. The track of sight sensation came from the conscious mind in the body above you, where you really were, and traveled through the astral cable to the physical eye. Some other symptoms of astral exteriorization are catalepsy, coldness of body, falling and flying dreams, and head-thumping dreams. One may see lights, images, figures, hear sounds of various kinds, all the way from inarticulate noises to beautiful strains of music. Mr. Prescott Hall, in his work on astral projection, summarized his own experiences in this connection as follows. The most definite objects seen were a Greek profile and the head and shoulders of the Hindu in turban. These were perfectly distinct. A brilliant red object. Third, large, round blue lights. Fourth, a small blue and yellow light. Fifth, landscape, sometimes of two tones and sometimes of natural colors. Sixth, luminous spaces and patches of mist or color, frequently outlines of persons but showing no definite details. Seventh, irregular shaped bodies of all kinds, white in color and usually seen in a patch of blue sky, or tissue paper figures. These were perhaps the rarest sights and required the most effort to produce. The principal sounds were the following: hissing or whistling as of escaping steam, single musical notes, musical phrases, generally new to the hearer, hymn tunes and other tunes which were known, harmonics often very beautiful, two or more notes alternating in regular sequence, the sound of a bell or bells, sometimes in harmony, metallic noises like the striking of an anvil. It's not unusual at the beginning of a projection to hear seemingly far distant sounds which sound familiar to the subject. Often it is as if someone far away were calling in a musical voice. A very peculiar sensation is as if someone unseen were blowing in one's face. Again, it's as if some unseen fingertips touched one about the throat, mouth, and nose, causing a tickling sensation. The astral cable. Nearly every student of spirit phenomena professes to know that the astral cord is an elastic-like structure connecting the astral body with the physical, and this seems to be the extent of knowledge so far given to the world concerning the schematic astral organism. Such ignorance is not difficult to account for. On the one hand, is the psychic experimenter who, if not capable of projection himself, can only form his conclusions from the statements of others. On the other hand, most persons who do project do not maintain consciousness clearly, if at all. Some become possessed of the temporary awareness at a distance from the physical body, and still others are so absorbed in the wonders met with that the thought of investigating causes never enters into their minds at the time. It is estimated that about 15,000 persons now living see more or less on the astral plane, and that about 50 persons can go out into that plane at will. Many times, while consciously projected, I have succeeded in intimately examining and observing the peculiar action of the astral cable. It's a sort of sideshow mystery participating in the main act called projection. This vital structure is composed, so far as I'm able to see, of the material the same or essence as the astral body itself. Its erratic action always made a very profound impression upon me, and at times I almost was led to believe that it actually was intelligent. Where it comes from, on the outgoing of the phantom, where it disappears when the phantom coincides, are two deep mysteries for me to fathom. Its elasticity is far beyond the imagination and is not comparable to any material object in its stretching qualities. The nearest one can come when trying to form a conception of the astral cord is to compare it to an elastic cable, yet such a comparison does anything but justice to this truly living organ. The astral cord always stretches from one body to the other, regardless of the space or distance between them. Cord activity range. The less space that lies between the two bodies, the greater is the thickness of the astral cable, the greater is its magnetic pull, and the more difficult to hold the stability of the phantom. When slightly out of coincidence, the cord is the diameter of a silver dollar. This is the maximum caliber of the cord itself, yet the aura surrounding it gives the impression to the eye that it's about 6 inches in thickness at this point. The diameter decreases in proportion to the increase of separation of the bodies up to a given distance, where it is then at its minimum diameter, which it retains from there to infinity, its caliber then being about that of an ordinary sewing thread. From immediate separation to the distance when the astral cord assumes its minimum caliber, there is always much activity present in it. This distance is called the range of cord activity. I wished naturally to determine how far this range of cord activity extended, for it had an important bearing, I found, upon the projection of the astral body. So the very first conscious projection I made thereafter, I noted with extreme care the spot I occupied as the cord reached its minimum thickness. When physically active again, I took the tape and measured the range of cord activity and found it to be 15 feet. For some time I thought that I had the distance calculated correctly, but when I again tried the experiment to verify the first finding, I met with a different result. This time it was about 8 feet. It was clear then that the range of cord activity was variable, and after dwelling for almost a year upon the matter, I eventually discovered why the range of cord activity varied. I noticed that when I was not feeling as well as usual, the range of resistance or cord activity was less than when I was in better physical condition. Repetition only strengthened this discovery. And I see again that the more one searches into this phenomenon of astral projection, the more certain one will become that material coordination is a powerful negative influencing factor in the result. The more healthy the subject, the more energy is stored in the condenser, astral body, the stronger will be the flow of energy through the astral cable, if he succeeds in projecting at all, and the longer will be the cord activity range. The more energy that is condensed in the astral body, the tighter will that body be bound to the physical counterpart. The more enervated the individual becomes, the less energy is stored in the condenser, the less tie it has on the physical, and the shorter will be the range of cord activity. And if a person becomes weakened to a very great extent, the astral cannot remain in the physical at all and moves out, sometimes permanently. Then the doctor says he died because he didn't receive enough nourishment. So it is obvious that the range of cord activity varies as the health of the projecting individual. A few inches of separation of the bodies and the cable is about the size of a silver dollar, regardless of the condition of health. But the decrease in size is speedier in the case of the enervated individual. When in fair condition, physically, the cord decreases according to the distance of separation somewhat as follows. At a few inches of bodily separation, 1 3/4 inches. At 10 feet, 3/4 of an inch, resembling a piece of garden hose. At 15 feet approximately, it might be at its minimum thickness, holding this size to infinity. It is an appearance of a whitish grey color, and when greatly extended, is not unlike a long single strand of cobweb. From coincidence to the end of cord activity range, there is always a double action taking place in the cord, that is, as far as one's eyes can determine. Yet I dare say that there are many activities present which are too subtle to be seen by the consciously projected individual, even if he observes the cable at close range. One is a regular pulsating action, the other appears to be a slight expansion and contraction of the outstretched organ. Ostensibly they are merged. There can be no doubt concerning the operations involved. The movement in the cord is an outward manifestation of a subtle vital process. Mention has been made elsewhere of the distinction between what is termed the passing at the time of death and the projection of the astral body. This difference lies in the fact that the astral cord is intact, running from one body to the other during astral projection. The phantom body is a condenser of cosmic energy, the very energy you employ in moving about. This energy is the breath of life, omnipresent in every living thing. The Adam and Eve story is no doubt fiction, but the ancient writer hit upon the truth of the matter when he said, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Without this breath of life, man would be really nothing but the dust of the ground. The breath of life is the universal, the cosmic energy condensed in the astral body, which you are using every instant. You may think you are a living body, but you are, as Moses said, a living soul. It is the astral entity which is the real you. It is the universal energy that is the breath of life. But what has all this to do with the astral cable? Simply this. When the astral body is in coincidence, you are physically alive. When the astral body moves out of coincidence, you are physically dead, unless the astral cable running from the energetic body to the physical body is intact. That is the purpose of the astral line of force, to deliver the breath of life to the physical body, while the finer body is projected. Throughout exteriorization, the breathing and heartbeat of the material counterpart must be sustained, and when the phantom is within cord activity range, an outward manifestation of this action can actually be seen throughout the entire length of the cable. Have you ever suffered from a headache when regular pulsations could be felt in the back of the head? Accepting the pain, such pulsatory action is like that felt in the medulla oblongata region of the exteriorized phantom, if the phantom is conscious, at every beat of the heart. Each throb of the heart can be felt in the astral. Each throb is expressed throughout the cable. Each throb produces a beat in the physical heart. All three are simultaneous. One can not only feel the heart's pulsations in his astral head, but he can feel them by touching the cable with his astral hand, just as you can feel your physical pulse with your physical hand. Each breath taken in the astral can be seen pulsing over the astral cord and causes a duplicate breath to be taken in the insensible body. When consciously exteriorized, one can suspend his breath at will, just as he can while in coincidence, but this is not a wise thing to do, especially for the amateur, as physical congestion is liable to set in and cause death. I have tried the experiment many times of holding the breath while consciously projected and within cord activity range. The instant it is suspended, the before-mentioned action of slight expansion and contraction ceases in the psychic cable, as it likewise does in the physical body. But while the respiration ceases, the regular pulsating action continues. A deep breath in the astral will produce an identical breath in the physical. A short one will produce short one. Quick one will produce a quick one, etc. You breathe in the astral and your heart beats in the astral just as it does when you are in coincidence. Your physical heart beats because within it the astral heart beats. It is the spirit that quickeneth. When exteriorization occurs, there is always a constant pushing and pulling sensation of the cable, which can be felt in a noticeable degree by the projector when within the cord activity range. If you can imagine some mighty giant holding you by the back of the head with a steady grip at arm's length, pushing you slowly away from him, drawing you back toward him, moving you from side to side, yet always maintaining a steady hold upon your head, and in that very grip you could feel a regular pulsation, then you can imagine how it feels to the conscious projector within cord activity range. This cord pressure varies according to the distance of separation. The nearer the bodies are to coincidence, the greater the pressure, or, as I might express it, the greater the space between the bodies and the smaller the diameter of the cable, the less the amount of resistance. This must be or should be held in mind by anyone contemplating projection, for it's difficult to accomplish much with the range of cord activity. Once you can advance beyond it, however, you will be as free as a permanently detached phantom. There is but one way to combat this resistance, and that is by willful effort, actually to exert all your will to move away from the physical counterpart. It is my belief that in most of the experiments in projection which are conducted by hypnotists, the phantom seldom is induced beyond cord activity range. We have seen how the breathing in the physical counterpart is controlled from the astral body and how one can consciously interfere with this vital function. Conscious interference, I have found, will exercise a control over the cable resistance. So too will the heartbeat affect cord resistance. The more calm the breathing, the less will be the cable pull. If conscious, strong, deep breaths are taken by the phantom when within cord activity range, the pull on the cord will increase, often even to the point of drawing the astral entity toward or even into the physical. I have tried this and know it to be a fact. On the other hand, the speedier and stronger the heartbeat, the greater the cord resistance. Although suspending the breath while consciously exteriorized will weaken the cable resistance, it's not advisable to practice it to enable one to get out of the cord activity range, for as I have pointed out before, the physical would become endangered for want of oxygen, as it is already in a weakened condition. The great point to be brought out is that emotion will increase cable pull and act detrimentally to the success of projection. Why? Merely because emotion increases the respiration and heartbeat. Suppose, for example, you should become consciously exteriorized in the astral body within cord activity range, and that fear should come over you. Your emotions would increase the heartbeat and the breathing would be hastened. The physical would be more enlivened. The resistance in the cable would greatly increase. And unless other factors favorable to exteriorization balance this opposition, interiorization would begin. Although the astral line of force can be likened to a rubber cable, it's in one sense unlike it. Suppose a rubber or elastic cable to be held at each end and pulled out. As the length increases, the diameter would decrease and the resistance would intensify. With the astral cable, as the length increases, the diameter decreases, but the resistance becomes less. The force working in the cord is not produced by it. The force itself remains mysterious. At times, the power working in the cable seems to be well governed, projecting the phantom steadily from the physical, and again, this power seems erratic, first forcing the astral body ahead, then quickly drawing it back, then throwing it to one side, then to the other, etc. Now, at all times during projection, there are factors at work which are helpful and factors which are opposed to the phenomenon, just like everything else in nature. When the positive factors overbalance the negative factors, projection progresses in an orderly and well-controlled manner. If the negative factors predominate while in coincidence, projection cannot be accomplished. If the negative factors begin to grow stronger while the phantom is projecting within cord activity range, they interfere with the orderly procedure. And although these two opposing forces are always present, the helpful influences must necessarily be slightly greater than the opposing ones, or outward advancement will cease. The force working in the astral cable will govern itself according to the balance of positive and negative factors which are always present. Remember, it's not the phantom which moves itself away from the physical or back into the physical. It is the subconscious force. To the conscious phantom, it seems as though the cable were actually intelligent. This is the subconscious force working in it. This force depends upon the balance of factors, positive and negative. When these opposing factors are almost equally balanced, and when the phantom has reached a distance of separation of, say, 6 feet, there will be instantly of the body a swaying from side to side, and forward and backward. You have already learned how emotion will increase the pull of the astral cord and how placidity will decrease it. It is really very seldom that these opposing forces do not conflict during a projection. Sounds, like emotions, will increase the tension in the cord, so the need of quiet is obvious. An interiorization caused by a noise. I recall one exteriorization when I was about 15 feet advanced, but still within cord activity range. It was about 11 o'clock at night. The progress was erratic and slow. In the cellar, someone of the family began to shake the furnace grates vigorously. The noise came unexpectedly. The whole cable seemed to vibrate for an instant. Then, with a super pulling force, the resistance drew me completely from the upright position into the horizontal, right through the air to a position directly over the body, physical, and down into coincidence, the entire coming back consuming an infinitesimally short time. Sounds and emotions will shoot the phantom back into coincidence more quickly than any other opposing factor, often with lightning-like speed. When such takes place, shock is always felt in the physical body, sometimes accompanied by pain, or as I have termed it, a split in two feeling. This is termed repercussion. Repercussion of the astral body. Within cord activity range, many curious phenomena may occur. Repercussion of the astral body itself, repercussion of sensibility, repercussion of motivity, dual sensibility, lack of sensibility, catalepsy, instability of body, and many others. We will first consider repercussion of the astral body itself. Probably the most common cause of bodily repercussion is the awakening of consciousness during the process of an unconscious projection. The phantom may be projected to any distance within cord activity range in an unconscious state when suddenly consciousness begins to appear. Almost before the first scintilla of consciousness comes, the astral repercusses into the physical with unthinkable speed. When thrust back into coincidence in this manner, the entire physical mechanism is jolted throughout, as though every muscle in the body contracted at the same moment, and the body gives a spasmodic jerk, more noticeable in the limbs than elsewhere. Consciousness, which incited the bodily repercussion, has commenced to become active, and as a rule, immediately after the repercussion, the subject is conscious in the physical body. There are hundreds of people, yes, everyone who sleeps, whose astral bodies move slightly out of coincidence for the purpose of becoming charged with cosmic energy every night. Have you ever noticed how, when greatly fatigued and in the hypnagogic state, just entering sleep, you have suddenly given a spasmodic jump and become conscious? The doctor calls this nerves, but that explains nothing. The solution of the problem is simple. When the condenser, the astral body, is run down, the subconscious moves it out of coincidence as soon as possible to enable you to recuperate more quickly. So when fatigued or in a condition of enervation and you enter the hypnagogic state, the phantom moves out of coincidence. A shimmering of consciousness appears, or a sudden noise, or something excites the emotions, such as fear. The astral body repercusses, shocking the physical, although it might not have been separated more than a few inches from it. The phantom, remember, is cataleptic, and the instant it coincides with vigor, it forces the relaxed muscles of the physical body into conformation with its own. If the phantom re-inhabits the physical quietly while cataleptic and you become conscious, you would find yourself in temporary paralysis. The shock that repercussion brings is always unpleasant and at times more violent than at other times. The violence of the shock corresponds to the extent of space through which the astral must move before coming into coincidence, and also the speed with which the interiorizing takes place. and the speed of interiorizing in turn is regulated by the amount of overbalance of negative factors. The greater the speed and the greater the distance, the more forceful will be the jolt. Velocity and distance combined produce the maximum repercussion, but speed is the more important of the two, for even at a distance of separation of only 1 foot, if the return to the physical is with intense velocity, the physical will undergo a violent shock. The most striking result of this quick reanimation, when both speed and distance are involved, is the feeling of being split through the center of the body. Split through the center describes the agony better than any other words I can think of. It's a sudden thrust of severe pain, as though a sharp-bladed instrument had passed directly through the entire length of the body. This more severe effect is not experienced so frequently as jumping, for the reason that most people do not have extensive separations. However, both are distressing enough. Whether there be any danger in this painful repercussion of the astral body, I am not prepared to say, but it's probable that such happenings are more unpleasant than harmful. When the return is governed as it should be by the subconscious with positive balance, the recoincidence is not felt by the subject. Should the student, in attempting to develop this phase, projection, meet with severe bodily repercussions, it is a symptom that projection has been accomplished to some extent, but that the negative factors are strong. One severe repercussion is likely to write finis on the production of further extensive projections, for the subject will be in dread of the shock, and this suppressed fear will always induce an emotion at the very first flash of consciousness and will shoot the body back into coincidence, only causing a repetition of such repercussions. On the other hand, if one is really anxious to project extensively and undergoes bodily repercussion, he must look upon it not from the standpoint of painfulness, which is but temporary, or fear it as dangerous, but accept it as evidence that he is succeeding and that it is harmless, and that he doesn't care a rap whether he repercusses or not. This eliminates the hidden fear which startles the emotions when one first becomes conscious while projected. Sound, sensations, and emotions cause bodily repercussions, providing the phantom is within chord activity range. Outside of the range of chord activity, of course, these influences are nil. Emotion is probably the fundamental cause. Sound, sensations, etc. are contributory factors. And just here is another paradox. Astral projection of the unconscious type is of such a nature that it will promote sensations. These sensations cause emotions in the mind or dreams, and the emotion in the dream will cause the finer body to interiorize. You may call this reasoning in a circle. In a sense it is, yet such action is the same as in dreams, that is, irritation of or sensation in the bladder will cause a dream of emptying the bladder, and the dream of emptying the bladder will cause it to be emptied. Usually the sensations promoted by astral body activities bring about aviation-type dreams, which we will next discuss. Chapter 4. Typical projection dreams. There are several repeater dreams caused by astral body exteriorization, which we shall now discuss. First, falling dreams. Second, flying dreams. A, the swimming dream. B, the upright flying dream. C, the giant stride dream. Third, the body and head flapping dream. Fourth, the head thumping dream. Fifth, dream of moving toward a phantasmal object. Have you ever experienced dreams of flying and of falling? If so, you will know how unpleasant they are. Many theories have been advanced to account for such dreams, and some of them are as incorrect as their originators are eminent. Yet these dreams are easily accounted for once you experience astral projection. Let us see what Walsh has to say concerning the dream of falling, and notice how it compares with what we have already learned of astral projection. I quote Dr. Walsh. Dreams of falling are far from pleasurable. Generally, they cause a shock which awakens the dreamer. Repercussion. Superstition has it that if the dreamer falls to the bottom of the precipice or whatnot, death will occur. This is fiction. Surely the only point in its favor being that we cannot awaken a person found dead in bed and ask him if he has had a dream of falling. On the other hand, the superstitions cannot prove their belief. It is, of course, possible that hysterical or nervous persons may have such vivid dreams of falling that functional paralysis or weakness results. The dream of falling may be associated with one of flying, coming after the latter, or it may occur independently. For example, a person may dream of flying pleasurably and then may suddenly fall, or he may dream of falling from a mountaintop or other high place without any previous dream of flying. In dreams of falling, we awaken always before we touch bottom. This is because we are on the road to awakening at the time of the dream and awake before its completion, or because the emotions excited by the dream are sufficiently strong to cause the awakening. There are many possible explanations of the falling dream. The usual explanation given is that it's related to the dream of flying, the difference being that in the former, respiration becomes more impeded or slower, and the numbness of the skin increases. Some interference with health may at times produce these changes. Probably it is meant at times produce these changes. Jewell, quoted by Ellis, states that